going on, guys? Welcome to the Rollup TV, Wednesday, September 3rd. Today, it is Ethereum's based future day on the Rollup TV. It's going to be exciting. It's Andy. I'm here. Robbie's going to join us. We got a ton of amazing guests today. Our first segment is with Thomas, the co-executive director of the Ethereum Foundation. We recorded this last night. We're going to play it as the first segment on this live. Then we've got 9 of the best guests in the Ethereum space coming to you live today. We just dropped the based Rollup market map. We will cover that as well. Guys, thanks for being here. Let's start. We're going to jump in with Thomas right now. Here we go. Welcome to the based Rollup stream. Welcome to Ethereum's based. Let's go.
Now we start.
All right. Come on. You're the first part of the based Rollup day that we're hosting today. It's the day before the day, so you're a whole 24 hours early. Good to see you, man.
Thank you for having me. Great to see you.
You're like the new George Washington of Ethereum. They brought you in, start fresh. People were ready for a change in leadership. People wanted to see a new Ethereum come out. Might I remind everyone who's watching that 6 months ago, Ethereum had scalability issues. The L2s weren't going to work. They were parasitic. The L1 was never going to scale. And this was not going to be picked up as an institutional asset because it was only Bitcoin as a special snowflake. The community was fractured and people were leaving for Solana. 6 months fast forward today, institutional adoption, DATs, base Rollups are getting traction. Still a lot of the inherent, I think, issues that people argue about in the tech, but the roadmap is shipping and there's a lot of work to go on the L1. It's just crazy how fast some of these sentiment and things change. Thomas, how has the last 6-ish months for you been as the co-executive director of the Ethereum Foundation? And maybe just describe how this personal sentiment shift has been from your perspective.
Yeah, I think it's a very, very long honeymoon period so far. It's been great. I think that very often I'm just a face of changes because of appearing on podcasts and communicating much more, but the changes had been happening before I joined. They have been happening in the shadows, in the background, like people in stealth mode build Ethereum together all around the world. And I think the first few weeks when I was joining and I was reaching out to people and asking for feedback, and many of them were saying, we're starting something big. We cannot allow this moment of crisis feel like it's a real thing, and they'll start contributing. And now you see the effects of that. Like many, you mentioned digital asset treasury companies, you mentioned some of the protocol work. All of that has been started sometime before I even joined, and some of it was EF leadership helping to coordinate, and then that leadership change was just part of it. So I hope this also makes people just feel very, very confident that Ethereum generally has so many leaders, some of them stealth mode, some of them very visible, some of them communicating, some of them just quietly building code, and that's all that matters. Sentiment shift in media. So maybe here communication is very important, like just coming and clarifying things, not allowing other people to fill in the gaps and saying that that's what's happening, but explaining clearly what's happening, what we were working on, how we're working on it, what are our plans, strategy. And even if you shifted slightly, if you make changes, over time, people start to feel it, how you communicate and where you have more or less confidence. I think we generally have a lot of confidence now because we're just catching up with the communication on the things that maybe were not communicated that clearly in the past, but were relatively clear. There's still some areas where we're exploring the technology side of how to solve some challenges, how to answer to the new challenges. But the team is strong. At the foundation, also the engineers, researchers, and business builders in the entire ecosystem are super strong. So yeah, great few months, some highlights. I've been traveling a lot and visiting communities everywhere, and I think there is a lot of excitement. There was excitement at 10 years of Ethereum and for the next 10 years too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you came from a very critical role in Ethereum. You were founder of Nethermind, one of Ethereum's clients. And so I'm curious, as you built up that company and it was very integral to Ethereum, you also had surrounded yourself with very technical talent in Ethereum, and you were very deep in the scalability roadmap and working at some of the deepest parts. And so now Ethereum has grown into so much beyond its technical capacity. There's not just developers and builders, there's founders, and now there's these DAT companies and Tom Lee and Joe, like all of these things that are now surrounding Ethereum. So I'm curious, how has your perspective changed? What was the lens that you viewed Ethereum through, and how has that changed up to your current role of executive director?
Sure. When I go back to when Ethereum was starting, and I was not during that time with Ethereum, like the first 1, 2, or 3 years, I feel that what was extremely important is that you had people there that were connected to institutions. You had people that were committed to the research against all the rushing. And there were people that were deeply technical and engineering focused, and all of that together created all components of the Ethereum success. And probably without any of those components, they wouldn't have the success of the early days, of the early years. When I was joining in 2017, the ecosystem, starting Nethermind, I've already seen many of the announcements of the at the time very, very dynamic Ethereum Enterprise Alliance that was announcing one by one large institutions saying we're going to build on Ethereum. And now, many years forward, many of those institutions that were announcing that time are very active, or maybe sometimes they just built something, tried, they disappeared, and then coming back, disappeared again. And here's 2025, and it's really year of institutional adoption, and you see the same names actually learn so much. And my journey with Nethermind was, very much more on the engineering side. I worked as an engineer before that as well, with financial institutions, with large institutions like Citibank, and then with a hedge fund, Rocos Capital, where practically, even as you're an engineer, that team is probably like, at that time, it was 50 to 100 people. So it means that you're a bit closer to all the events and you're observing what happens. But still, I agree, like Nethermind had this very, very engineering focus of how to build the client performance optimization. I think in 2019 or so, we were leading that push for performance matters, right? Like you have to really think as well that the clients can contribute to the improved performance, that engineering excellence will matter. And that's something also, like the fact that I was building the code base myself at the time for a few years. I was really a coder of the core developer, coder. I participated in those processes. That helps to understand now the challenges when scaling, helps to appreciate the effort of all the client teams, also the limitations and the worries. But also it means that you can be a bit more brave in making some claims about what is possible and push people a bit more towards the limits. Obviously, you always risk that your core devs will be overloaded, feeling burned. That will be crazy. That will be really bad. But you also understand that sometimes is that motivation that we're going to the exciting times, that it all matters, actually prevents the burnout. When people see that everything is going well, that you're participating in something great, that you're among the elite of engineers building a lit project that matters, then it really drives you. And I think that helps. And then talking about it also is a pleasure.
And have you seen examples of that inside the Ethereum community and the Ethereum Foundation so far, with Robinhood coming on chain? These companies, crypto companies going public, like there is adoption. It is a lit protocol. Like these things are happening. It must be very gratifying internally, and also, everyone in the community feels it. Have you seen those examples inside as well?
Yeah, sure. I mean, core developers are not disconnected from sometimes they are disconnected from the news, and that's great. Sometimes they just feel the moods, and everyone in the community will notice, okay, there are big announcements, there are changes in the US market, there is a bit more openness from regulators, there is equities trading on chain, and I think that you'll see more announcements this month. I think Ondo is preparing something. I've heard something from Coinbase today as well. So you see more trading on chain, and regulators being very friendly towards that. That is bringing that feeling that you actually have an impact. At the same time, it brings a few questions about, do you continue working towards all the values related to retail users? Will you continue providing privacy and censorship resistance? People start asking about capture, about maybe leaning towards one part of the world too much. So we pay attention. We are excited, but also always cautious. We owe that to protocol, to provide security, to provide all the attention to what matters, why people are building long term, why people are not leaving to shiny new things that appear for a year or two. And we've seen many examples of the chains that just have this like super momentum. For a year or two, you feel like they kill everything. And we went from the ups and downs of Ethereum, and people know that there is something deeper there, why they're building, why the community stays, why do people in stealth mode, why they're there. Because you can always judge the size of the community of those who claim everything is going well, but it's a bit harder to judge how many people are there that will appear in the time of crisis. And Ethereum has extreme power of attracting those people that don't care about visible things, politics, and just appear when needed. And that's what makes the chain continue going.
Totally. Actually, Robbie asked this question to some institutional folks that we had on earlier today, which I think is also interesting for you. Kind of shifting gears away from the community, away from what makes Ethereum so incredibly powerful from a technology perspective, really the social layer, the social consensus. Some call it maximalism, others call it belief, some call it tribalism, others call it ideology and decentralization. Whatever you kind of want to label it, it's important to have people that care about, the core ethos of what we're doing here. And I actually even put out a recent tweet about crypto entering its practical era. And unfortunately, a lot of the practical decisions that are being made in the space are coming at choosing convenience, speed, or low cost over decentralization. Kind of really still trying to figure out that triangle of kind of like core parts of blockchain in its trilemma. And so that being said, I think the best part about the Ethereum community in the lows, in the highs, is the steadfastness in the belief of censorship resistance, in permissionless nature, in decentralization, in low node requirements, these types of things. So that being said, we do have a very interesting paradox on our hands, which is companies like Bitmine and SharpLink. I think Tom Lee has gone out and said that he wants to buy at least 5% of the supply. I think SharpLink is looking to get 3%. And I think it's reasonable to say that at some point in the future, there could be a world where 10% or more of the Ethereum token supply, ETH supply, is in the hands of institutions. And the question today that I think Rob posed, and in my own words, was essentially like, how do you think about this? Like, how is it better that the institutional foothold with longer time horizons and a deeper understanding of what this technology is, is it better that they are able to have such a strong amount of supply of these networks to dictate governance processes or changes, or at least have a say? Or is there a point at which this poses a systemic risk to the Ethereum protocol, to the ETH, the asset, and Ethereum, the blockchain? How do you think about this now that Bitmine and SharpLink, I believe, have both recently passed the Ethereum Foundation in terms of total holdings, which I think is super bullish, but I think the trend is only accelerating in a snowball-like fashion?
Yeah, sure. So probably one aspect of it is general economic theory, where I wouldn't claim that I can go extremely deep there. Sure, you think about what happens with capital over time. Like you have institutions and people amassing capital, and how resilient this displacement of capital is over tens of years and so on. So does it really affect governance? Does it cause trouble? And I think separate. So this is separate from blockchains in general, from Ethereum. And when you ask about the digital asset treasury companies, they bring it, and you mentioned that as well, that institutions are appearing, they have a bit more practical focus. They will maybe say that they don't think too much about the community aspect and the long-term values. You need both. So you need that pragmatist, practical approach to push for excellence in engineering, making sure that you can integrate all the institutional work, institutional flows. You need also the community and long-term vision. And I think we're doing great in combining the both. I love what happens around DETs and bringing a lot of education to financial markets. They ask about what Ethereum is. They start by seeing those new tickers, and then they ask questions. What is Ethereum? How is it governed? What really drives it? Why is it long-term? Why I can trust it? And even as you have this like constant chanting motivation about the Ethereum success, people like it as something that drives them, but it doesn't mean this is a capital market. People care about risk. So after hearing that, they feel encouraged to read more. And very often you have businesses that say, all right, this is possible allocation of capital for us, hold ETH, but what does it mean? What are the risks? And you have rating agencies coming to us and asking questions about how we can help them to understand the governance processes. There are people asking about security, and then suddenly for the Ethereum Foundation, it sets a lot of additional requirements of communicating clearly why everything is safe, why everything is permissionless, and that matters. I was many times I mentioned now that it's the institutions that start to be the drivers of our own values and come to us and say, show us the security, show us that censorship resistance, show us the privacy for the customers of the institutions. It's the regulators that start asking about the same things. So finally, we have people working together towards those goals. They start realizing, okay, in the end, this is that global neutral network that we are building together, and it's combining financial markets, it's combining regulators' efforts and the community. And now you mentioned if it's 5-10%, technically, well, this is not risk for governance. Sometimes, like the governance aspects, you have the social consensus, you have all the protocol parameters, and you have info where the capital and power is. And the whole design of the network is to really balance all of them together and to realize that even for the social consensus, that if some capture of the protocol would be possible just simply by capital, then it's still, the capital will be really, really worried that some totally sorry, I don't want to use bad words, but irresponsible action from the capital owners would put that capital at risk if they face the social consensus. It's a bit like a community revolt, right? That is possible. It's extremely unlikely that you ever enter into this dynamics. But because it's possible, it holds also some aspects of protocol beyond the technical aspects. We can do beyond the formalization of the protocol. It keeps everyone in check. So you have digital asset treasury companies that definitely are great for distribution of the knowledge, education about Ethereum. But they also should be scrutinized on all the risks underneath. There will be some of them that are probably extremely trusted by the people involved. Some other ones where people are coming with maybe either less experience or simply rushing that as an opportunity to make money, or simply trying to create a structure that wraps their holdings. And I think over time they will differ between each other, and there are definitely risks between them and among the digital asset treasuries. And all of that has to be scrutinized and verified for the risk. So some optimism, it's great it's happening, and also some warning signs here. And as a foundation, coordinators will just keep reminding people that there are risks there.
Yep. And the Ethereum Foundation early on was a shepherd of the ideology like you said, you were almost front running the institutions. Now they're coming in and they're realizing what Ethereum is and what it could do. Regulators are coming in and they're asking these questions about decentralization, censorship resistant. And these were ideologies the Ethereum Foundation and the early innovators of Ethereum had in their mind, and they were the pilgrims that spread this to the rest of technology, finance, this industry as a whole. And so couple that with the institutions coming in, the regulators now taking notice, and the other fact Andy brought up in his previous question about now these institutions in terms of capital and weight with respect to the Ethereum network, they are now surpassing the Ethereum Foundation in their ETH holdings. So I'm curious, how do you see the Ethereum Foundation evolving as these other entities start to take a greater role in the network and Ethereum Foundation seems to have a lesser role? How does this play out?
I don't think that Ethereum Foundation was ever using its ETH holdings as a way of promoting the values. We're using really the legitimacy of the researchers and thought leaders, and the money is there to spend on the operational expenses, to cover the team within the foundation, to support institutions that have been spawned over the last years and needed some initial funding to become independent from the foundation. So that's where very often the funding was directed. So now when you look at the foundation's treasury, which would be probably around $1.1 million, and you say that some of the digital asset treasury companies will be beyond that, like their holders of more ETH, but neither we are using that for governance, nor them necessarily using that for governance. They have limitations, like they can stake obviously the ETH, but does it mean that they will have much more to say than the general protocol voting? But then it's, I'll call it 10%. It will not be 33%, and it will not be, even if it's 33%, it will be distributed among different holders, and then this is just capital, but there is still a very strong influence of the all-core devs, of the researchers, of those who believe in Ethereum values and just activate further influence because they are thought leaders. So all of that balances, and I don't think it's any shift in the foundation role just because its holdings are lower than holdings of others, because we're not using those holdings for governance. They're just like for paying the expenses. And also foundation doesn't really observe the central role. It hasn't had the central role. It has this role of filling in the gaps. It was less visible in the last years when maybe it was a bit risky to be too visible, but it's more visible now. But also because it understands that there's so many other organizations that are visible, so it's so clear that we are not central. That we're just like one of many institutions. Some of them are more business focused. We are more coordination focused and guidance and research. So that role maybe is. You will have maybe Gnosis, maybe Nomic, and a few other foundations that really work on ZK research, and so like 0xSpark, and a few others, and they all serve that role, but maybe not in combination of like research and governance coordination. So foundation is sometimes unique, sometimes just one of many.
Yep. Yeah, and to your point, the foundation still has probably the largest base of intellectual capital focused on scaling Ethereum. And to that end, the Ethereum Foundation has outlined three focuses, really three priorities to really just continue to scale Ethereum to the extent that we all know it can achieve. And those three are scale the L1, scale L2s, and improve UX. This was part of a thought piece. I think Vitalik might have put it out. It was on the Ethereum Foundation blog, and it highlighted these three priorities. And so, because we have this based Rollup and native Rollup live stream that's going to be continuing throughout the day, we're going to drop a market map. I'm curious, of those three, scaling the L1, scaling L2s, and improving UX, why are these the three most important priorities for the Ethereum protocol? and how do based rollups and native rollups help us achieve one or more of these areas of focus?
Sure. So we set those 3 priorities for 1 year, starting around April this year, which means that we are almost like halfway through. And really it spans over the 2 forks of, well, starting with 𝘱𝘪𝘴 in May, and then you have 𝘱𝑜𝘢𝑚, and then you have 𝘗𝘬𝘪𝘴. So it's like 2 or 3 forks together. 𝘗𝘬𝘪𝘴 may come slightly later. I don't know if it'll be March or June. These 3 priorities were selected based on the draw mode, feedback from the ecosystem, combination of knowledge of awkward devs and researchers, of what really matters and how you can create some synergies. And it doesn't mean that this is something that we'll continue talking about 2 years from now, or even like 1 year from now. We'll start talking about the next priorities based on the refresh of what's happening now. So this is more tactics behind the values of thinking always about the privacy, censorship resistance, security of the network. This is always there as the base. Then you have some, like, let's say 10-year strategy of where Ethereum, what big problems Ethereum is solving. And we started talking about it slightly during 10 years of Ethereum. And we, for now, we were a bit more quiet about it, not to distract people, but we talk about some big problems ahead of humanity and vision. And then you have maybe 3 years view, which is what we do for the next generation of protocol. And then you start talking about lean Ethereum and what Justin Drake is talking about, and look maybe more in if research topics. And then you see those like 1 year response to the problems now. And some of them are technical, and those are talking about how to make a credible commitment of scaling L1 for the L2s, how to scale L2s directly for the blobs, and how to solve all the questions around interop and UX. So really there is clarity that is a single ecosystem between the L2s and L1s, and whichever one you choose, you can connect and you can move the assets and you can move your deployments of applications pretty easily, and you can use the same tooling in many cases. Not always is like a perfectly comparable. Some of those chains on the L2 level will be EVM chains. Some of them will be non-EVM. Some will go just more standard rollup direction. The other ones will go with this base and native rollup. And you're asking me about base and native rollups. I think they add a lot of additional flavor and choices and options for some very important cases. Like nowadays, some of the institutions will come and ask, so if we are to launch an L2, which to choose, like which ecosystem to choose within the L2 space, how to do it. And with the base and native rollup, some of the solutions will be just much more no-brainer, easy to deploy, and will be not focused on community and branding and innovation, like very often it is with the L2s, and that matters, and we benefit from that a lot. Like that distribution through a fashion of branding to the approach of community or maybe regional focus is what makes Ethereum unique nowadays. And with native rollups, you'll have this bland rollup, like very L1 aligned, that is just focused on, okay, just deploy a rollup. We need it for our internal processes, or we need to connect to the network, something that we already have that exists. And the institutions and independent operators, or maybe so people who will be operating agents in AI, will be able to choose which flavor works the best.
Yeah, and just one follow-up on this is we've seen some institutions like Stripe. They've went and they've launched an L1. Circle, they have said that they're going to launch an L1, and a lot of people on crypto Twitter have said that these guys in the long run are going to end up switching and being an Ethereum L2. So I'm curious, what's your pitch to these guys? Like, why should they be Ethereum L2s rather than be their own L1?
Yeah, sure. So you've seen recently some of the L1s transitioning to L2s on Ethereum. So you've seen Celo, and they now very clearly say they see better numbers, better adoption, better reaction of community, and that helps them to succeed. You've seen recently Ronin announcing that they'll be switching to the L2, and there is that question of this aspect of bidding for which ecosystem to belong to, which maybe is less of something that I would like to see. And then you have those L1s for payments for stablecoins that have been launching recently, and people would say they transition to L2, and I think that there is a bit of preference for, oh, we'll get the L1 premium, then maybe we'll launch something, and then there is always space to transition to L2. I think that we should maybe also start talking of this direct Ethereum ecosystem premium, like not going around and not losing those years of just being maybe like less openly adopted by everyone because you just keep claiming isolation from the ecosystem. They're not really isolated. Like they're launching and they say we'll be EVM, we'll be bridging to Ethereum, we'll remain very close to Ethereum ecosystem, and it happens. Like so, even within those organizations, you'll see many of the researchers, technologists, or business people will be saying behind the scenes, like we still working with Ethereum, Ethereum is the ecosystem that we're choosing, and we're launching L1 because of this or this or this, which means that they feel it, that they feel there is a tension between those choices, that they might be putting something at risk, that they don't want to lose the community support, they don't want to lose that power of thought leadership that comes from Ethereum ecosystem saying they're one of us, right? Like so it's never like walking away entirely, and that's why we probably have that conviction that at some point they're switching to L2, and we maybe should start talking more and more often about why sometimes or very often this will be a mistake to not go directly in that path of just being very clear. We belong to Ethereum ecosystem. It's not only EVM, but it's also all of the values, global aspects, interoperability, that all of the effort and research improvements that will come from the not only from the foundation, but the entire ecosystem is something that will drive their technology forward. And if you go along, that suddenly you realize that they launch the chain, and then another institution launches a chain, and then suddenly they start competing with this. If you're successful, there will be like 20 or 30 of those corporate chains, institutional chains, and those start doing the same that what we see everywhere else. Like you're launching the video streaming company, and then you start fighting for the exclusivities, for you blocking some content. And at some point, people say, oh, maybe I just go back to piracy like 10 years later because the entire market gets disrupted. You have some great UX very often, and some market is covered, but then you start competing regionally. And I think that might be the case here as well. So choosing Ethereum, I think you go to this global platform immediately. So that's where the conviction comes from. Sometimes this will be reasonable business strategy for some more regional or niche market. Sometimes it'll be great for some period of time, but it will not have the same guarantees of never disruption. Yeah, it's also like launching a major investment bank nowadays and saying that you don't go with digital assets, you don't go with blockchain, you just build a traditional system as well. That's much more extreme case, and maybe it's not a good analogy. But you always can get some temporary premium, but you're not coming with the same guarantees of global neutral network.
Andy, I think you got your...
I think that's probably what a lot of the logic ended up coming down to be. Thomas, thank you for kicking us off on the Based Rollup Day today. Hope you enjoy the map of the teams building in the Based ecosystem. I know we're kind of coming low on time here, but yeah, any closing thoughts for the teams who are building Based Rollups for Ethereum?
I think that there's support for Based Rollups. Like there's coordination around it. There is lots of excitement. I think that when you think about Based Rollups, 1 year ago, it was like in the middle of creating all the new directions and innovation in the Based Rollups, and then maybe in the last months, on one side there is continued coordination. Some teams are already deploying lots of those novelties, but also maybe you've heard in some areas you've heard less about Based Rollups. I think this should not be discouraging. There's lots of support for that. It's part of the strategy longer term, and it'll be probably extremely relevant for many of the institutions. So there'll be market for base rollups, for native rollups for sure, and even as we talk about the broader ecosystem, L2s, that shouldn't be discouraging. That's just that we see all of these flavors of Ethereum very relevant in many different aspects, and they'll find their own users, their own deployments, and their own revenue models.
Awesome. Tomáš, thanks so much. You speak of the gravity of Ethereum. Ultimately, it is this black hole, this sink for intellectual capital, social capital, financial capital. All of it is coming to Ethereum. And you are its shepherd and its steward. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your time with us.
Thank you so much once again for inviting me. It was great to be on the podcast. Thank you.
Awesome.
Nice.
Cool. Leo has got us
way better that way.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
Here we go.
What a great segment from Thomas. I mean, really, really enjoyed that one. Obviously, we did that yesterday. It was fun. And yeah, I mean, today we're going to just continue the Base Rollup live stream, Rob. Good to see you. Good to have you back. Got a ton of guests today. We just dropped the market map. It's about to hit 50K views on X. Our first guest is Lewis. Our first guest is Lewis from 𝘗𝘠𝘦. And
Yep.
Yeah, we will get him up and we're going to roll with it. How you feeling, Rob?
I'm feeling great. It's another good day. Beautiful day in Florida and beautiful day in Ethereum. Obviously, we're going to be talking about base rollups and native rollups today. I think there is some debate on whether or not the future of Ethereum scalability comes down to based rollups. Ultimately, we're seeing a ton of action on Ethereum in multiple different ways. We're going to hear from a lot of Ethereum leaders, founders, and builders, such as Lewis from 𝘗𝘠𝘦, who's going to be coming up next. And pretty excited for today's stream. It's been a little while since we got deep into the technical weeds, and it feels like we're getting back to our roots, Andy.
Alrighty, well, we've got Lewis, so we'll bring Lewis up. Yeah, Lewis, man, it's you're following up the great Thomas Sterženek. I cannot pronounce that name, but you were the first one today here on the Base Rollup stream. Thank you for your collaboration and contribution in helping to get this all together, man.
Thank you, guys. Very glad to be back, and I'm sorry I'm forcing you guys to talk about infra again. I know you guys want to talk more about apps probably, but here I am. Infra's back.
Yeah, we have been. I mean, we've definitely been expanding our scope of just kind of conversation topics, a bit more of the stuff that's happening more in the current. I'm just curious how your podcast is going, man. I saw that you guys have been recording some episodes. How's that been going?
Yeah, it's actually a lot of fun. I sort of started that like on a very sort of low effort basis about 1.5 years ago. And I just realized that a lot of times at my job, I was basically having really good conversations with other founders just as we were integrating products and so on. So at some point, I just decided to hit the record button and post them. And yeah, if you guys don't have infra fatigue, these are very long, very infra tech focused podcasts. Usually we have a lot of content there around 𝘗𝘠𝘦 infra, but also around Arrakis DeFi sort of market making side. So yeah, very, very deep dives with just Hilma and I from the 𝘗𝘠𝘦 side talking to other founders.
Very cool. Well, one question that I got from the market map so far has been, in the subheading, that there's a line that reads "Building the Future of Ethereum L2s." And guys, if you haven't seen the market map, it's in the comments on the stream on the main pin link. Check it out. There's 50 plus teams. It's really a good showing of teams that are building to kind of scale Ethereum while keeping the kind of properties of censorship resistance of the L1 sequencing. And so, yeah, Lewis, I mean, the question that I received from a couple of teams was actually like, do you believe that based rollups or based and native rollups are the future of Ethereum scaling? And so I pose this to you right now. We have a lot of these, typical single sequencer L2s. I think Starknet actually recently just pushed out a more decentralized sequencing set in their 𝘗𝘠𝘦 update. They had actually a small outage. But now it feels like we're getting closer to this next era of rollups and L2s. And so, do you firmly believe that based or native rollups are the future of Ethereum L2s?
I think they're definitely a very important version of the future. And I think there's a flip side to this where the whole block space rollup market will look vastly different from what it looked like in the last 2-3 years, in like, let's say 5 years from now. I mean, recently we've even seen a new trend of L1s, sort of old L1s coming back with Stripe and Circle and so on. I think ultimately these models will likely not win against the rollup model because of basically the cost efficiencies of using rollups. And essentially, when you're building an L1, you're trying to usually build a validator set, and with a rollup, you can get like the same amount of sort of decentralization for a much cheaper cost, I would usually argue. So you can essentially rent validator sets as a rollup. So I think, but overall, I think what's very important to say is what we've seen in this, let's call it the first wave of Ethereum L2s, I don't believe is the future of Ethereum L2s. However, some rollups we've seen in there are like, they don't care about Ethereum. They are already sort of pretty much well served by what we have today. It's interesting because I think Ethereum sort of led that innovation, and then nowadays you also have others like Celestia and so on really pushing the envelope. But it's funny, like it's almost ironic that a lot of the rollups that work today, they work well when they don't really care about Ethereum, using Ethereum as a settlement, as a true settlement layer, like it was initially intended for, using Ethereum for asset issuance. Actually, originally, before we posted this base ecosystem map that we're talking about today, I also posted something on ETH Research. What streamers should watchers of the show should go look that up on Ethereum Research. And there I have a bunch of data in there. We also published some of the data with Blockworks, where you can see exactly how little Ethereum is actually being used by the current day sort of poster children L2s. Exactly. So basically, to wrap it up, I think true Ethereum rollups are poorly served today. That was mostly due to Detect not being ready, but now with base rollups becoming ready or being ready, with ZK, really with teams like Succinct and with ZK finally being ready, we can have a wave 2, and this time around you can have true Ethereum L2s.
Yeah, I mean, so you guys wrote about this idea of like Ethereumness is kind of what you're getting at here. And you guys ended up coming up with this idea of a Ethereum settlement score measures how much L2 users / assets truly use Ethereum for, what Ethereum is good for: settlement, censorship, resistance, security, etc. And basically you guys came to the conclusion that the current state of L2s score poorly in this in this measurement. You wrote about some of the reasonings here. What are like the top 2 or 3 core parts of a L2 right now that you believe get it far closer to a higher Ethereum settlement score than like Arbitrum, Base, Optimism, Abstract, etc. are? What is it? Is it about the canonical bridges, multi-sigs? Is it about just some of the sequencing properties? What are the core properties that you are looking to really evaluate these L2s on?
Yeah, I actually got that pulled up next to me on my screen here, so I'm going to make sure I'm going to speak accurately. So first of all, in the Ethereum settlement score, which is a motion and a sort of new scoring system that I came up with by incorporating a lot of empirical data that we gathered as a Rollup as a service provider. When we launched Rollup as a service at Gelato 2 years ago, we understood L2s and Rollups like very differently to what we then actually saw in the market, right? And like under the Ethereum settlement score, strictly speaking, you can score between 0 and 1. And all of the rollups today, even Arbitrum, even Base, they would get a 0 because they all still heavily rely on multi-sigs and security consoles upgradability. And like that's like Ethereum, we can all agree on is not a multi-sig, right? Like it's actually a decentralized network. And again, I'm not here to shame any of these rollups. Like I think a big factor was that they were all super early pioneers and the tech simply wasn't ready. But now there's a bit of this inertia, and they're like everybody's a bit comfortable. They all have a bunch of TVL. They're all somewhat sovereign, and they don't really need Ethereum technically so much anymore because they all went pretty far on their own. I think now with this new technology, there's a chance for the old rollups to update the systems if they want to, or for new entrants to become the next big Ethereum rollup by embracing properties of immutability again, in the sense of that there's no like security council multisig for a rollup that, or I guess basically that's like a core property, and that's the keyword here are native rollups. Like native rollups are even earlier in research and development than based on zk. But native rollups are going to be I think the biggest unlock to really bring Ethereum settlement back to the L2s, where actually the rollup itself will be sort of verified on the L1, and zk is a very big enabler of that as well. But apart from that, apart from native rollups and sort of getting rid of upgradable smart contracts and having the rollup straight transition function execution be enshrined on the Ethereum L1, that's the native rollups. Apart from that, what's really important is based rollups. That's why we have the based ecosystem map, because based rollups essentially say that you use Ethereum for liveness and censorship resistance guarantees to the max. That means that when you include a transaction on the rollup, it's almost in real time also included on the Ethereum L1 with pre-confirmations and so on. So even if you have a rollup whose state transition function is verified on the L1, you still want that to happen in real time almost, and that can be done by having based rollups and essentially bringing forced inclusion times from. I think nowadays you already have pretty good ones on Arbitrum, like 24-hour windows or something, or maybe a bit longer. Base rollups are about bringing that down to like real time or Ethereum block times. So that's why in the ESS framework, the most important factor is sort of becoming based if you want to score highly. Native is a precursor you need, and then the other weights that you can find in the formula there that I'm referencing on my ETH research post are like empirical things like, hey, is your rollup actually using assets that were issued on Ethereum? Because the whole purpose of a rollup is to have assets, to use Ethereum as an asset issuance layer. Actually, Vitalik also talked about this recently. And then sort of move assets from Ethereum into the rollup. And if the rollup malfunctions, you can get them out on Ethereum again. But if you look on my data like that we found there, today you will find that actually most of the assets on rollups on Ethereum L2s do not originate on Ethereum. They are either bridged in via like layer 0 OFTs, or Circle uses CCDP, or they're even natively issued on the rollup itself, like 𝘰𝘳, for example. The 𝘰𝘳 token is on Base, right? And there's no reference of that token on Ethereum. So for all intents and purposes, 𝘰𝘳 treats Base like an L1, right? It's very important to measure like the actual way the rollup is being used in terms of asset flows, ins and out, and issuance. And that empirical, that's what makes the ESS Ethereum settlement score so cool, because on L2B today, you can get all green slices like this Fuel V1 rollup does. It has 80, like it was the first one with green slices, but it has $80 in it. No one uses it. So have they really achieved anything? Not really. With the ESS score, you really can only get a higher score if your rollup in practice, in production, is actually using Ethereum, and the users of the rollup are using Ethereum assets and canonical bridges. So yeah, and in general, this is not like pure Ethereum maximalism or something. This is just a way, like I would say, to like sunlight is the best disinfectant. This is a way for Ethereum to become honest to itself again, and to have a way to measure how good Ethereum actually is at making its settlement services available. And to be fair to the current day L2s, Ethereum really sucked at a lot of that. But now Ethereum can become much better because Base is getting ready, because we have zk, because native is coming. Ethereum, as an exporter of censorship resistance and security, will have new technologies available, and then we can use this Ethereum settlement score to measure whether the rollups actually leverage those. And I think as Ethereum participants, we can use this to actually score Ethereum and not just the rollups on how well Ethereum does on its mission statement, right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Long no, it's great. I think what you're doing is you're going in and looking at the way that we're analyzing these rollups now, and acknowledging that it's not perfect, L2Beat has done a great job. They may join the stream a little bit later, and we can talk through what upgrading some of those slices could look like so that we have a more granular insight into the security and the sustainability of these rollups on a more practical sense. Because you're right, it's a little bit ridiculous to have all green slices with a rollup, even though the fuel guys are great. Nick is, you know, a great founder over there. They're doing things with V2, but what's the value in having fuel V1 with $80 TVL with all green slices? The last thing I want to ask of you, Lewis, before we kind of get to the rest of the people joining the stream, is Gelato what have you guys been up to? A lot of the things that you guys have done has been to put rollups as a service through the industry, and now to spin up a lot more rollups. And now we're looking at the UX, we're looking at the interoperability, and we're seeing more ways to connect these together, like you said, with ZK, as well as with other things. And so how are you guys helping to push the rollup ecosystem and the rollup centric roadmap of Ethereum at Gelato and everything that you guys are doing to support your clients?
Yeah, so actually, Gelato started out with what we called ZK-RAS back then, because the first framework that we supported 2 years ago was the Polygon CDK, which now has been deprecated. And we were like Polygon and us, we were a bit too early on the ZK front. We noticed that, and we were like the first wave of ZK EVMs there. We had this chain, 𝘂𝘃𝘀 network. They now have an OP chain with Sonium, the company behind it. And what we're always in production, right? So we are at the bleeding edge, and we very quickly notice what real customers actually leverage, what's valuable for them and whatnot. I think what's changed is, like, while we were a bit too early with ZK 2 years ago, I definitely feel like 2026 is finally going to be the year that ZK is going to happen in a big way for rollups, with new technology like the one built by 𝘱𝑒𝑖𝑛𝑐, for example. Of course, a team that we also work with closely. So I'm very excited for ZK. I think all of Ethereum is, right? Like, it almost feels like Ethereum on my timeline recently is sort of rebranding overall as like a ZK thing now, right? Because ZK is such an amazing technology. I do, however, feel like it's very important to create this urgency and to have people understand that they now need to go out and actually do it, right? And they actually need to deploy. So it's always a bit of like, who's first, right? And who's going to be the first to be successful. One way that we also really help, I mean, with native rollups, you can't really do much anything today. It's too early, it's in research. But with based, we have already concluded internal testnets with Kraken Inc., for example. We recently upgraded their OP chain to Flashbox, but they're also really interested in trying based rollup solutions. So we're working on testnets with them, seeing how Inc. chain could potentially become based in the future. So really big companies like Kraken that are really at the forefront of trying out these new Ethereum technologies, that even though Kraken, like, you know, as an enterprise chain, I think they can very much do very well on their own with the existing rollup technology, because they have a huge exchange that they will connect to that chain, right? Like, they have an amazing product line coming up soon that will connect to Inc. But they are like they're very crypto, OGs, and they really want to do more than just be an enterprise blockchain. They want to be at the bleeding edge as well. So yeah, we're really getting our hands dirty, working with them, trying out the state-of-the-art technology in terms of based, in terms of ZK. So yeah, I expect that next year we will be really pushing for it. That's why I'm on the live stream today. I want to create some urgency around this topic, because Ethereum has momentum again, right? Like Tom Leo or whoever that guy is pumping our bags. So now, so now I think it's time to actually say, like, look, sure, Ethereum is going up again, but actually a lot of the critiques around L2s, the L2 roadmap, were actually right? Just because the price is going up doesn't mean that we should be complacent. Now's the time to leverage that momentum into change. Yeah.
I asked Tomas the same thing, and I just put out a tweet about it. ETH 6 months ago had all these issues. ETH now has no issues, but the thing is, not like materially in the tech side, there's still a lot of work to do. Just because Tom Lee is buying a ton of ETH does not mean that the same problems that we were facing last year don't exist this year. Lewis, thank you for helping put this together. for being the first live guest today, for creating this Ethereum score. Looking forward to kind of seeing more and more of how this plays out. And thanks for pushing the agenda today, man.
Thank you. And I just want to give a quick shout out to 𝘗𝘂𝘵 as well, because I'm really drawing a lot on what they have built. And I'm just sort of mixing it up into a new score, which I think hopefully they will find useful and they will include on their homepage. And also shout out to you guys. Last time I was on this podcast, it was very different. And I actually started watching your live streams recently, and I get the dopamine hit when the music kicks in. I love the whole look and feel of it. So you guys are doing a lot. Yes.
The world is trending in this direction. You open your phone and you're not doing anything. So you open Twitter and looks who's live. Might as well hop on and listen. So thanks, Lewis. I appreciate you, man. And we'll speak to you soon.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Lewis.
That was the very first based roll-up segment of the day, breaking the news on the Ethereum settlement score. New kind of mechanism to think about how rollups are using Ethereum's core properties. Up next, we got Simon from 𝘂𝘂. Again, this is another based rollup team. This one actually is building a based rollup on Ethereum, a very functional, high performance perps DEX. Simon's a good friend of the show. We invested in 𝘂𝘂 well over a year ago now. And yeah, stoked to kind of get some product updates, understand how Simon's thinking about some of the technicals on 𝘂𝘂 and more. So I think he's ready in the back. We'll pull him up and yeah, let's talk based rollup. Simon, welcome to the Ethereum is based mega stream, man. Good to see you.
You guys as well. Thank you for having me. It's you guys have got a marathon today.
Indeed.
Yeah, we've got a journey ahead of us.
Yeah. Well,
appreciate you joining us.
Yeah. You're the first actual based rollup today. We had Tomas of Ethereum Foundation. We had we just had Lewis from Gelato on the Ethereum settlement score. So maybe just a quick intro on what 𝘂𝘂 is and why you chose to build your design for your product in such a way that you did.
Nice. And you're looking tanned, Andy. There's a life in Hawaii.
Surfing daily.
Yeah. Well. So I mean, the first thing that we'll say is that 𝘂𝘂, so we already have a live product. 𝘂𝘂 is a DEX, right? Like we already have a live product that's built using 𝘬𝘂𝘵𝘬𝘴, right? It's a very deliberate first step to try and get to like what we see as very much the end state, which is the based rollup design. So we've announced probably about 6 weeks ago now the design for what we're describing as 𝘂𝘂 chain, which is going to become the world's first application-specific based rollup, right? So we've got general purpose-based rollups. We're building an application-specific one where the app is a DEX, right? Like, and why are we kind of taking that path? Well, like what it effectively allows us to do is, at a macro level, it allows us to enshrine a DEX into the Ethereum L1 effectively. And what that enables is it enables a trading experience that is millisecond level fast. So it's as fast as TradFi, but it is on the other side, it is as decentralized as Ethereum. So we've essentially been able to deliver what is a holy grail in terms of DEX design, where it is both fast and decentralized, right? Like which kind of lots of people have been trying to achieve for a very long period of time. But you could only do that with a based rollup. And then on top of that, what's really powerful is by being based, you earn or you effectively unlock synchronous composability with the Ethereum L1 and with other based rollups. So even if you just keep it as a crypto only kind of like thing, which honestly, I really don't think it is. I think it's like a Wall Street thing. But if you keep it as a crypto only thing, the product which we're going to create is going to be faster than any other DEX out there. It's going to be more decentralized than some of the best DEXs out there. And it's going to be atomically composable with the entire ecosystem that exists on the Ethereum L1, right? So they're not the only things that are required to build a great exchange, but as foundational layers, it is extremely like strong as the set of foundations.
So Simon, I put out a tweet that I think is really relevant to your idea here, which was about, it's actually from perpetualpulse.xyz. I'm not sure if you've seen that site from those tweets that I was putting out about like those screenshots of the notion. But basically, the tweet was around perps dexes being the best businesses in crypto, and that they appeal also to technical people, which is great. And so I wrote that you should absolutely know if there's an escape hatch for your chain. In this example, like Hyperliquid doesn't have one. You know, Hyperliquid, it has no escape hatch in the sense that if something breaks, there's no way to, like, you know, force your capital out. If there's a centralized sequencer basically for latency racing, so if you can be very close to that and you know where that is, and it's not a rotational set of co-located sequencers, then you have an advantage. What a centralized matcher means, you know, and the differences between soft finality and hard finality. And I think that these are the trade-off spectrum that you're kind of operating in. But basically what you're saying is like, okay, we figured out that this design that we've laid out for RheaChain effectively navigates each of these in the best way possible, such that we have a secure, you know, censorship resistant chain, but also can optimize for performance. And so maybe you could elaborate just briefly on some of those specific technical things that I mentioned there, if you will, or just broadly kind of how you're thinking about that trade-off space a bit deeper.
Yeah, so basically every single DEX today has had to make a decision as to whether they want to optimize for decentralization or optimize for speed, right? And there's a spectrum of I mean, I can reel off a whole load of examples, but if you go towards speed, then historically you've had to make a trade-off on decentralization. Hyperliquid being like the most obvious example. They started off as 4 co-located nodes and they're able to be very fast, but like 4 nodes is not particularly decentralized. On the other hand, you could go and build something as a set of smart contracts in the Ethereum L1, and you are going to be as decentralized as the Ethereum L1. But the Ethereum L1 is not built for trading, right? So it's never going to be fast enough to effectively allow price discovery to happen on chain, right? So you're making a trade-off at that point that you want to be decentralized, but you're not going to be fast. If the Ethereum roadmap effectively unlocked the ability for people to decouple execution or trading execution from consensus, right? So even like one of the criticisms of Hyperliquid long term is that they propagate all the trades through a consensus mechanism. So as the node validators scale, right, like you are kind of effectively going to add latency because you have to propagate each of those trades through the consensus mechanism in order to actually like reach finality. The Ethereum roadmap like broke that relationship, but it came with some trade-offs, right? And that's where you started having things like escape hatches, right, which were introduced. And also, like, what you lost is you lost composability with the Ethereum L1. And what a based rollup does, which for me is like the massive breakthrough, is it allows you to have something that is millisecond level fast. So what we have is we have a set of execution nodes, right, where they are able to kind of essentially build L1 blocks through a similar mechanism to PBS, where the Ethereum L1 validators are delegating responsibility to those execution nodes. So you have a set of these very highly performant, beefy machines that are running these execution nodes. So they can be extremely fast, but because they're inheriting the delegation from the Ethereum L1 validators, you are effectively maintaining the decentralization of Ethereum. So you effectively end that trade-off between being fast and decentralized.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing, isn't it?
I mean,
it's very nerdy, but it's beautiful.
The blockchain trilemma was real for so long, and now it's seemingly solved with based rollups, at least to a certain extent. And from my understanding, the last time we spoke, you guys aren't just building this vanilla-based rollup. There's other elements to it that kind of go beyond what just using the Ethereum L1 as the sequencer. You mentioned like the execution nodes. What are some of the other features that you are able to enable, something that consumer facing, there's a value in, a further use case than what you were able to provide as a rollup on Arbitrum Orbit?
Versus Arbitrum Orbit? Is it? Yeah, so number one, I think it's going to be faster, just way faster. So you can achieve millisecond level trade speed. And if I just explain that very briefly, so you have the Ethereum L1s, they delegate responsibility to build a part of the L1 block to an execution node, so like proposer builder separation. right? And then this execution node, because it knows it can include transactions in the L1 block, when you as a user come along and say, hey, I want to execute a trade, it can give you what we describe as a pre-conf, so pre-confirmation straight away back to the user and say, I'll include that transaction in the L1 block, right? So immediately you're able to move from block production to effectively streaming of transactions, right? And you're able to do that with a different level of guarantee that is about to be included in the L1 block, right? And you, at that point, effectively have 12 seconds to finality, because it will then go into the L1, the very next L1 block. So as a user, it's faster, but then alongside that, you have different liveness and censorship resistant guarantees versus a centralized sequencer, right? So because we have multiple execution nodes, if one were to go down, another one would become the leader, which doesn't happen with the current version of 𝘠𝘪𝘵, right? And then alongside that, obviously from a censorship resistance perspective, if one were just to get shut down, right, like you've got other execution nodes that you can move to as well. So as a user, you've got these like long-term, like effectively, you've got the short-term benefit of being fast, you've got the long-term benefit of it being more reliable as an exchange, essentially, over the long term.
So in specifically about the perps business for Rhea, I have a broad question about why this matters in perps, and then a more specific question about Rhea. I put out this tweet that it was like Hyperliquid had this much volume in 24 hours, and then Lighter had this much, and I think it was like 5 billion for Hype, and then Lighter was like 4.5 billion. And people were ramming me, being like, dude, doesn't matter. Lighter has 0 fees. Their OI is like 1/20th of Hyperliquid, blah, blah, blah. So like, maybe you could explain to us and to the audience, why is OI the metric that matters in perps? Why is open interest the important variable of the value of a given perps platform?
It's effectively a measure of how much how much the platform is supporting like trader opinion, right? Like it's probably a bad way of describing it, right? Like so volume is something, and I guess within that, volume is something that's very easy to manage.
Like wash trade.
Yeah, particularly if your trades are free, you just go back and forth, right? But holding OI means you're holding risk, right? So if I've got an open position of 1 billion long, right? Imagine James wins back, right? Like a billion long on ETH, right? Like then I'm actually holding exposure, I'm holding risk, right? So it's a better measure of how traders perceive the product and whether they're willing to hold risk on that exchange.
Got it.
It's just back and forth.
Yeah,
because there's a time value of money factor into this equation where,
and there's the funding rate and whatnot. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think both matter. You can have loads of OI and no volume. I don't even know what that means, right? It sort of means that you just got people with positions that haven't closed or something.
Yeah, like longer term positions or something.
Yeah, but like it's so I think both matter. But when your fees are free, yeah, definitely, it definitely creates opportunity to manufacture volume. Right.
So you got yourself one of the best businesses in crypto on your hands. It's pretty much like Pump.Fun, Launchpads, and perps dexes right now. It's like there's really not much else. I mean, there's 2 tokens on the market that are doing significant buybacks right now. It's Pump and it's Hype. There's going to be a lot more perps platforms launching tokens. Rhea is obviously pre-token. I'm just curious, like you've been building this for some, I mean, we invested maybe a year and a half ago. You're building this probably a year prior to that or more. You've seen like this entire kind of wave of different philosophies as to generating revenue and doing, different kind of ways of supporting your shareholders, token holders, et cetera. Like, I'm just curious more from the business perspective. How are you thinking about now that you've seen kind of this unfold? How are you thinking about the future of the Rhea network being a sustainable, profitable business, returning that value to shareholders or to token holders, or just building out this kind of flywheel that, we've got the Rhea machine that is the perps dex that gets to billions of dollars a day in volume. Then you've got the Rhea asset potentially in the future, sooner than later. I don't know. But like, how do you think about this, like sustainability of this model and what are your current like business philosophies around it?
Yeah, I mean, _PerpDex is generate huge amounts of revenue, right? Like this, and you guys invested, probably about a year and a half ago, something like that, before we launched. When we went live, we were originally kind of pushing the network a lot harder. One of the things that we've changed over the past 12 months is we've pushed now a lot more just into the exchange and just focusing on that. We kind of had 2 products at the beginning. And for anyone that's following very closely, I mean, we've like, the numbers have just turned the corner over the past 4 months. So what people probably don't know is I have changed huge parts of the team, hired people from 𝘬𝘳𝘬𝘴, from big trading firms like _𝘬𝘳𝘴, changed the engineering leadership, changed the person leading marketing, right? And all of that's paying dividends now in the fact that over the past 4 months, we've more than 10x our volume from a monthly basis. So everything's heading, from our perspective, everything's heading in a really positive direction. And when we roll out this based rollup, which is going to be the first of its kind, we obviously expect that to accelerate. But from a revenue perspective, I mean, _PerpDexes generate huge amounts of revenue. We've got our tokenomics designed. We haven't announced it, but one very obvious thing that will happen there is that the revenue will go towards buying the token, right? And that effectively creates a whole lot of kind of buying demand for the token itself, which is driven off the revenue.
I mean, the beautiful thing is that it creates a bottom for the token. Like it creates a floor.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to just wait till the tokenomics come out, right? Like we're going to do something that's definitely different and I think going to be a first for the space, which I'm very excited to like announce, but I'm not going to do it right now. And I mean, it creates buying demand for the asset, right? That's just fundamentally what it does.
Yeah, I mean, I think we had last thing here for you. We had Michael from Framework, who I also know invested in Rhea, and we were speaking about the different Rob, it's like P/E ratios, like the way to think about what the value of certain assets are, and
price to earnings ratio. Yeah.
And I think the S&P right now, he was saying, is that about a 12 maybe, or a 22 or something, in terms of like it's at one of its highest valuations based on the amount of earnings and like actual revenue being created in the market. And then you look at something like these revenue plays, and you know they're appealing at like a 2x that. At a 5x that, I don't know if it's really that appealing, but he kind of made the case that, you know, all these crypto protocols that are generating similar or you know, a revenue structure can probably be modeled at a more aggressive ratio in terms of price to earnings than traditional stocks or traditional equities, just because it's such a small market still. It's like perps can be huge.
Yeah, and also the upside. So this just, I don't necessarily think all token prices follow that like level of formula, but there's people typically have higher price to earning ratios if they believe the growth potential is higher. And particularly from our perspective, right? Like just if I talk about it rare, Ethereum is being adopted by Wall Street as the settlement and custody layer or self-custody layer. But if you want Wall Street to move on chain, you need price discovery to come on chain too, right? And what we are doing with Rare is we are creating the kind of first DEX that's ever going to be effectively enshrined into the Ethereum L1. And what that unlocks is it unlocks price discovery on the Ethereum L1, right? And therefore enables us to move the whole of Wall Street on chain. So, you know, look, whether Rare gets priced based on price to earnings ratios or not, I don't know. But the reason it would be higher is because of that huge growth potential.
I think what you're describing, and this might be the last question before we let you go, Simon, is that as Wall Street moves on chain, and that's measurable. Like, you know, Arthur Hayes put together this piece on why he thinks Hyperliquid is going to, you know, do a 500x, but it's effectively the same valuation as Rhea. More, you know, you got Treasury Secretary Bessent, 3 trillion stable coins on, you know, in circulation by 2028, right? And the idea is that as more of these stable coins become in circulation, that translates into volume on these DEXs and into perps. And then more volume means more revenue. And so is this sort of like your fundamental equation that's going on in your head as well? Is like, okay, if we can get a certain amount of volume as a result of increased in stablecoin supply, which is coming on chain because of a Wall Street coming on chain, and that equates to greater stablecoin supply. Do you kind of see it that way, or is there another way that you kind of create this mental formula?
Yeah, I think you can try and build it up in that way, or you can approach it from the macro perspective. And the kind of top down is a just cartoonishly large number. There's 1,000 trillion of notional traded in capital markets today, right? Like, and if you move that on chain, then you're talking about moving 1,000 trillion market per annum on chain. It's just bonkersly large, and that's clearly happening on Ethereum. Like, Ethereum is being adopted by Wall Street, but Ethereum itself as an L1 is never going to support price discovery just because it's not built for it. So what we're doing from a Raya perspective is we are creating a DEX that is effectively enshrined into the Ethereum L1, and in doing so, we're creating on its own, it's unique. It's going to be millisecond level fast, so it's going to be as fast as TradFi. So that allows price discovery to start happening on chain, and it allows us to actually start bringing the whole of Wall Street on chain.
Yeah. It's a beautiful thing.
And it also, like, just the functionality of Ethereum allows for price discovery in new assets that were not available before, like prediction markets.
Exactly. And by being based, it's synchronously composable with the whole of the Ethereum L1. So you could have a flash loan that you do on Aave, you could do a trade, you could unwind that trade, you could repay the loan. Right? Like, you can't, I mean, there's just a type of use case that just doesn't exist in TradFi.
Simon, man, appreciate your time, and looking forward to continuing to see the building, Raya tokenomics, and more, man. I think you got a good thing on your hands. I appreciate you joining us today.
Nice. Thanks for having me. Good to catch up.
Speak to you soon.
We'll see you next time, Simon.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
All right, buddy. Peace. Man, Rob, best business in crypto, perps. It just never fails. I mean, they're just going to keep growing. That website, perpetualpulse.xyz, is just insanely good as well. This is just a Notion board that I was looking at. And I mean, man, let's see. What is Raya? Raya did 72 mil of volume today so far.
72 mil today?
Yeah. Hyperliquid did 8.7 bill as like the highest reference. I don't see any OI numbers for Raya today, but it's pretty crazy, man. So, all right, we got Murat coming up next, founder of Prime. We're going to talk some MEV. We're going to talk block building. We're going to talk synchronous composability, something that Simon also brought up. So, yeah, let's talk about it. And let's talk about some of the privacy stuff. Let's get Murat up, and let's get started. Murat, good to have you. Welcome to the based Rollup Mega Day on the Rollup. It's good to have you.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. It's wonderful to join again.
Yeah, man. Well, let's get into it, man. First question, big one. Should all base rollups use encrypted mempools? Why or why not?
Look, I mean, for trades or privacy-related transactions, I do think everything should move towards an encrypted mempool. But then you do have these regular transactions where you don't care about, or maybe it's some like operational transaction, and like, let's say maybe a contract deployment or something like that, sometimes where you don't care about it. So you might not need an encrypted mempool for those things. But similar to how the internet works, I mean, sometimes I don't care about the data I'm sharing. Maybe it's some shit posts on some site, right? But that is encrypted too. So it's better to have it than not at the end of the day, regardless of your need.
Interesting. And so would you say that this setup, one that PrimeEv enables, maybe you could also give kind of a primer on PrimeEv for anyone who's unfamiliar. Let's start there, and then we'll get into the types of use cases that you can enable with PrimeEv.
Yeah, I mean, we stood up the first encrypted mempool on Ethereum, particularly that allows pre-confirmations, right? So you can abstract Ethereum speed from your own experience and get these basically instant economic finality, right? So we can enable instant deposits to exchanges. You don't have to wait 3 minutes on Coinbase to start trading. If you deposit some ETH, you can send ETH ERC20s to your friend very quickly. These are live. Soon we're going to have greater coverage for swaps and trades as well.
Awesome. And so would you say that the rollups that are transitioning either from an L2 or an L1 or just looking to launch something completely new, and they're looking at a based rollup as their solution, they should enable PrimeEv because it gives them this pre-confirmation out of the box rather than having to build it themselves or trying to get it from the sequencers? That's the 0 to 1 here.
Exactly, and they get pretty large network coverage for L1 out of the box. So we have this unique hybrid model between validators and block builders. So we don't particularly rely on just validator adoption. We don't particularly rely on just block builder adoption, but we kind of combine them. So we have a little over 1% of Ethereum validators already adopted this, and this is live. But in August, we reached a peak of 11.3% of mainnet blocks that had pre-confirmations over MEV commit, right? And this kind of showcases that flexibility between the supply side adoption. So base rollup would get basically 1 out of 10 blocks today already with adoption.
Wait, so you said 1 to about 5.5%?
So we're consistently about 5.5% of, in a 24-hour span. But we hit 11.3% on August 20th, which was kind of a shocking moment for all of us.
So if your pre-conf system is already scaling this fast, then does this mean that every L2 in the future will need PrimeEv to really consider itself to be based?
Well, we don't think of it as a need basis. It is certainly an accelerant, and they don't have to think about, hey, how do I interact with L1 or any of that out of the box. But we see MEV commit as more of a channel to get very expressive transactions. So your average L2 or your based rollup doesn't have, for example, MEV bundle support, right? It doesn't have pre-confirmations. And we just introduced a brand new feature that allows you to set where in the block you want to be executed on. And this allows you to kind of avoid a lot of front running statistically. So they get all of this out of the box. And the folks that are using that on MEV commit already on L1 can then transact on their rollup very easily.
Okay. And so I'm curious what success here looks like. Like how does the landscape of Ethereum start to change as we go from 11 to 25 to 50 to 75%? How does the makeup of the Ethereum validator, kind of the block building cycle, how do things adapt and evolve as we start to scale this up?
Yeah, the main thing is that it completes this ongoing trifecta for Ethereum. So what is happening on Ethereum? You're having gas scale and you're having transaction fees come down. So this kind of ripens this environment to have scale on Ethereum. But scale itself without speed isn't too interesting. People like scale, but they don't want to wait. So the speed that MEV commit brings kind of completes this trifecta for Ethereum mainnet to grow similar to an L2 or even outshine it in many ways, right? And ultimately, we're all better off if Ethereum mainnet does really well and is kind of this main hub where asset security is there, scale is there, and DeFi activity and stablecoin activity is proliferating, right? So that's the real vision, that to kind of bring that trifecta in together to make mainnet the hub for all of it. And then obviously all rollups and every other specialized domain gains benefits from that as well.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, go ahead, Rob.
So I just want to kind of round out the trifecta that you're describing. The entry queue into the validator set of Ethereum is extremely large right now. There's a lot of validators that are looking to enter. There's also
it's exit, I think, right?
I think it's both right now.
They're both, yeah.
Okay, cool.
And that shows that this is a very vibrant ecosystem with a lot of inflows and outflows, and so there's demand in order to be a validator on Ethereum, and that kind of exhibits that security point on the trifecta. The other two elements of scale here are going to be speed and cost. At my understanding, what you're describing with speed is this pre-confirmations. Cost is more dependent on the DA capacity of Ethereum. Is that the right way to think about it? Maybe you could kind of help, round out what the other 2 points on this trifecta are.
Yeah, more or less, you're on point, right? But to kind of get into the nuance a little bit, is that the gas limit of an Ethereum block, which famously went from 30 to 45 million in the past year through community signal, that's been a huge boon in terms of scaling, and that's why you're having kind of L2 level transaction costs on mainnet now. For a few cents, you can get a mainnet transaction in. And that's going to increase with the upcoming Fusaka upgrade in November programmatically all the way up to 150 million, right? So now you have capacity to have a lot of transactions per second. And that indirectly reduces cost per transaction, which is now a right of environment. If you bring the speed component to that, you have this trifecta where you can just kind of go all ham on mainnet.
And in the Fusaka upgrade in November, that is going to raise the gas limit from 45 to is 60 or?
I think it's programmatically going to increase. At first 60 is one of the goals, and I believe 90, and then 120, and all the way up to 150. I'm not sure if the timeline for that programmatic escalation is implemented yet, but that's the idea.
And so people are like happy that 𝘬𝘳 for Ethereum right now has been around 1, 2 for the last while, even less. And you got people on Twitter saying no one's using the chain. Obviously, in times of massive use, there will be still spikes, but essentially the goal is to get this thing down or get the gas limit up to a certain point to where we don't see 𝘬𝘳 go into the hundreds ever again like we did in 2020. And to be able to make this, the goal of the L1 maybe will never be like a Hyperliquid or a Solana fast, but the goal is to make it such that it can support thousands of L2s on top of it, and transactions on the L1 as well. For I don't know, people say that it's reserved for like wealthier people or people who have certain things that want to be done in the future. I don't know, but I'm just curious. Like, that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. I don't know how you're kind of thinking about it.
Well, I mean, part of that's certainly true, but you're also gonna have a situation where now a dApp can come on Ethereum mainnet. It doesn't have to go to some L2 directly and get access to some assets, some DeFi stable coins from there, because chances are, there's more assets on mainnet for whatever they're looking for. And now that, through speed, through scale, that can easily come to this dApp environment. And then the dApp can use many tools to now port that to some L2 that they feel more, comfortable operating in, or they have some other features there. Like for dApps, the main thing about all of this trifecta is that, look, you have speed, scale, and low cost. Get access to all of the assets on mainnet. This is for you, dApp. Build yourself to get all this security, stablecoins, DeFi access, harness it, and then take it to whichever EVM chain that you feel comfortable continuing that operation on. And that access is what's most exciting for dApps, actually. Security is nice and UX is nice, but the fact that they can access the biggest hub on blockchains for all of these assets in DeFi is the main selling point.
So you're describing this life cycle of a dApp where they start on mainnet as an application, smart contract app, and then they eventually graduate to an L2 once they have liquidity and a user base, and then eventually they scale out from there. Is that the right way to think about it?
Yeah, but it might happen very much in the background, right? And they might use some tool that does chain abstraction for them, whether that's a wallet as a service tool or something like Balance, right? Basically, once the user is on the dApp and they transfer their assets on L1, then the user doesn't have to care about which, the L2 the dApp is kind of porting all the compute to, right? And that's the point. Now they can have 1,000th of a transaction cost, or even on mainnet's one 𝘬𝘳 or something, and then not have to worry about it. And when they want to withdraw, they can withdraw back to mainnet directly.
Yeah. And so basically you get the composability with the L1 applications itself, while also still getting the benefits of the cheap execution and the speeds of having the L2. I mean, it sounds like this is like, it sounds like having a base rollup with some sort of like alt DA and super high, super juiced, some juice like Rethkline or something like that. Is like it's close to a really cool end game for scaling Ethereum.
Yeah, it's certainly moving in that direction. The best benefit is it's all modular, right? So then you can compose these components in any sort of way.
Exactly.
But we've positioned 𝘂𝘂𝘵 to be kind of the bridging gap for many of these use cases, and particularly for 𝘂 flow to hit your dApp, hit your chain out of the box very quickly, and have multi-chain support.
Yeah. So how do you guys make money then? Like, how are you guys gonna make money, or like, do you make money?
So today there's a 2% fee on 𝘂𝘂𝘵, order flow. Essentially, it accrues in the protocol treasury. We are going to take this back to zero, and we're moving to a different fee model in the future. As our chain decentralizes, there will be a token. The vision there is not to just have some MEV token, but rather, when you look at the MEV landscape on Ethereum, it's been very individualistic. What does that mean? I use some sort of OFA tool, right? I have $1,000 trade. It goes through some auction and it generates $100 of MEV, and I get $90 back. It feels good, but I just got MEV from my own transaction. I'd rather get MEV from all of Ethereum's transaction. There's no way to be exposed to all of Ethereum's MEV. Right. So by kind of tokenizing some of these rewards that you're getting from, sending a transaction and pooling all of those funds into a treasury, we can now give users a token that represents all of the MEV on Ethereum. So now by, transacting on Ethereum, you get an upside of all of the MEV on Ethereum, which is literally billions of dollars per year. Right. So we're kind of shifting that MEV game, and we're kind of using this term, look, YOLO your MEV. You don't have to care about some cash back, but you're going to get tokens, and those tokens will have a claim on the entirety of MEV across the ecosystem. And because of how MEV commits connected to all of these supply chain and demand side actors, we can pool resources from validators, we can pool resources from users, and we can actually transfer more of that ETH that's currently going back to the user to the validator, increase the security of Ethereum, but align all of the incentives of all of this MEV participants under one token, and they can get exposure that way.
Wow. So if I'm bullish on MEV, I need to be owning Prime MEV. This is good. That was a good sales pitch, man. Fuck yeah, I'm bullish.
Yeah. And traditionally this has been a controversial model, right? All MEV should go to the user, or all of it should go somewhere. But if you come to terms with it, users aren't interested in making the $90 on their trade one time. They're more interested in getting some upside of all of the MEV, all of this activity,
Definitely.
even when there's. So I think that's what this can truly unlock in the success case.
And
Awesome.
Just one last thing for you: is the MEV market in total, as you see it, growing or shrinking right now?
It's definitely growing, right? I mean, if you look at on-chain active addresses on Ethereum, it hit an all-time high in August. I know there's a lot of FUD on Twitter, but there's 19 million addresses active or something. And with the gas scaling, what happens is, like, there are a lot of MEV opportunities where it's making like $1 in profit, but because gas is so high, it's not economical for the searcher to submit that transaction. Now, when the gas costs come down, you have not only more transactions generating more opportunities, have these kind of micro MEV transactions that can now go through profitably. And that usually, increases activity on its own because, there's more bots doing stuff, and then that creates more opportunities, more arbitrage on L2s, et cetera. So you're looking at kind of this cycle of activity, brewing.
I can imagine how synchronous composability as a result of more rollups becoming based also creates a lot more velocity for the ecosystem.
For sure. And we're adding support for these, cross-chain MEV bundles on MEV commit. So you can say, hey, look, this is the Ethereum part of my transaction. This is the Optimism part of my transaction. And those things will always increase activity, make prices more liquid, assets more liquid, and prices more equivalent across different chains.
Very cool. Well, Murat, thanks for being a part of the Base Rollup Day today. It's been a great conversation, and we wouldn't be able to be here without MEV commit and just generally this type of thinking with regards to block building and pre-comp. So looking forward to seeing more of the work that you guys do with some of the larger chains, especially if they shift towards being based. I think we've seen some rumors. I think Justin Drake was talking about Aztec and Base and Mantle and some of these thinking about shifting. So I don't know what your BD pipeline's looking like, but if I were you, I'd be BDing over there. And
we're definitely expanding to other chains. So appreciate it. Yeah. And thanks for having me again. It's always a pleasure.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Murat.
See you next time.
See you, man. Cheers. MEV, man. How do you get exposure to the MEV market?
I guess
You buy
Prime
Prime coin. that was pretty funny, huh? Yeah, that's good stuff.
Cool value accrual idea, because obviously the consensus was like, look, if you're capitalizing MEV and you're putting it anywhere except for returning it to the user, you're this toxic MEV extractor
Yeah.
ore.
100%.
But,
Jared from Subway vibes.
yeah.
Jared from Subway. All right, I think we got Edward, the head of BD at 𝘗𝘂𝑛𝑡, who are building into the prover economy, prover networks, Ethereum level proofs, trust anchors, OP 𝘗𝘂𝑛𝑡, and more. We'll get Edward up here, and yeah, we'll keep this based rollup live stream marathon going. If you guys are just tuning in, welcome, Edward. Guys, check out the based rollup market map. I'm looking at it right now. It's pinned below. We got 50 teams building this based economy that we know and love. We've got 𝘗𝘂𝑛𝑡 up here today with Edward, who are building a lot of ZK proving tools. Also recently went live with the Prover Network. So congratulations on that and the launch of Prove. And yeah, man, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys. First time, long time.
Beautiful. Beautiful, man. Well, we just spoke with Murad about some of the MEV block building, pre-confirmation setup of some of these based rollups. And I think it ties in well into some of the work that you guys are doing with OP 𝘗𝘂𝑛𝑡 and thinking about based rollups in that capacity, and just really just like working with Conduit in their G3 sequencer and just trying to just juice these chains. So maybe you could just give us an introduction as to, what 𝘗𝘂𝑛𝑡 is, what you guys are building in the base space, and then kind of, yeah, just like walk us into this OP 𝘗𝘂𝑛𝑡 performance jacking mentality that you guys have over there.
Yeah, happy to give a quick intro. So at 𝘗𝘂𝑛𝑡, our mission is to prove the world's software. Basically, we're trying to make ZK proofs accessible to every single developer, every single application, every single rollup that's actually out there. And we have like a few different product lines that speak towards this. So our sort of fundamental product is SP1. It's the world's most production ready ZK VM. So for developers, when they're writing ZK applications, they don't have to go down to the circuit level and do all this moon math to make cryptographic proofs happen. They can just develop in Rust and create the normal business logic for their program, and then just take care of everything in one shot. And then the sort of complementary piece to this is like the Prover Network, which recently launched on mainnet. So here we're actually decentralizing the actual proof generation to our network of provers, partners, and third-party teams more generally. And all of this is in the service of making proofs more decentralized and driving the cost of proving down. And sort of the way that OP 𝘗𝘂𝑛𝑡 plays into this and the whole like based and native conversation we're having is that, today the adoption of ZK proofs is actually like quite tricky. So you have a lot of folks like zkSync that have built like great products to sort of mainstream ZK rollups in the first place. But for all of these existing teams on Optimism and Arbitrum, they're sort of like stranded today. So with our OP 𝘗𝘂𝑛𝑡 product, we gave every OP stack rollup the ability to become a ZK rollup. And like, that's a huge part of this based native vision, right? Where like, the proof system starting to become front and center to make sort of better interop possible. It's ultimately about like enshrining ZK into the entire Ethereum ecosystem.
Yeah, and that's kind of what Ethereum has positioned itself around now, is like this. We saw Justin Drake give this whole snarkification of ETH, and the entire Ethereum ecosystem is moving away from optimistic rollups towards ZK rollups. And so I'm just curious, how do you see Ethereum changing as ZK becomes more performant, more affordable, and just generally more ubiquitous in the industry? How do you see Ethereum evolving as a result of ZK?
Yeah, for sure. So I think like something that we're super excited about and something that I think the EAP is really excited about is that like sort of ZK allows us to sort of break free of the limits of the EVM. So like, Justin has talked a lot about like increasing the gas limit on ETH-L1 dramatically. And like ZK proofs are a big part of this story because like, you no longer have to re-execute all these transactions to make sure that they happen correctly. You can delegate that verification piece to all these ZK proofs, and like verifying these proofs quickly and concisely is like super easy. And as you can imagine, like for Ethereum, this is like a core part of making the Rollup-centric roadmap actually work, scaling Ethereum and like the entire family of chains on the stack.
And so just to clarify how that would work is if we use ZK proofs to execute transactions, it costs a lot less gas, right? And that would allow us to raise the gas limit and therefore create more transactions within a certain block.
Correct. And like that sort of thing is like really critical because, as you imagine, you know, Tom Lee is pushing this big narrative to all these institutions on Wall Street. You know, as more demand comes into the Ethereum ecosystem, we need to actually keep up with the sort of growing, you know, ecosystem of applications that are building, the growing types of teams that are building on Ethereum, and scaling the L1 through ZK proofs is a huge part of this mission.
And you're on mute over there.
𝗗𝗦 has a very, very big tagline, which is like every rollup will be a ZK rollup. Yeah. I spoke with her like in Denver, I think this year about it. Haven't caught up with her too recently. Is this something that Succinct still firmly believes? If so, how do you guys foresee this transition happening? I can't imagine it's going to be a peaceful transition, but maybe it will be. Maybe talk us through how this happens.
Yeah, it's a great question. So yes, every rollup will be a ZK rollup is still very much a tagline for Succinct, and this is something that we've believed since day one of the company, because you know I think fundamentally this just makes sense as an architecture as we think about like the terminal state of where Ethereum will be a couple years down the line. And I would actually say that like you know, most of the big rollup teams are actually surprisingly sort of open to this narrative now, especially because Vitalik is out there leading from the front. You know, he's publishing these think pieces about how ZK is really important. And I think like everybody's getting the message. And yeah, actually like very recently, we just, you know, landed this very big partnership with the sort of Arbitrum ecosystem. So we're working with off-chain labs to make ZK like a first-class citizen in their rollup stack. And I think like Arbitrum very much has been thinking about ZK for many years. And I think like the fact that they're willing to take the leap with us as their ZK design partner to enshrine ZK into the overall like Orbit stack is like a great sign for the overall adoption of this technology. And we hope that they are going to be the first of many.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't have to be the one to say it, but it's pretty indicative of the general strategy that eventually Arbitrum 1 will probably transition, you know.
And even Optimism was using some ZK stuff for interop as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct. Yeah, like you can't see me in the background, but I'm knocking on all the wood right now because yes, you know, ultimately the decision for Arbitrum 1 is going to be like a DAO-based decision, but we'll certainly do our best to have a great proposal and sort of explain to the community why the transition for Arbitrum 1 will be really important.
Well, it was a big difference in like the way that the Ethereum leaders kind of started to talk about some of the ZK VM projects. Like you saw Justin Drake go and be like, okay, we're going to use Succinct. We're going to use, I think, Jolt, Risk Zero. We're going to try to bring these into the L1. Like we're going to, you know, and like Vitalik referencing these 2 years ago, they would never reference non-Ethereum projects. You know what I mean? Yeah. It was kind of like, so that was a big mental shift, I think, in the way that they were thinking about using some of the technology that these awesome teams are building into Ethereum.
Yeah, I think one thing we jokingly say in-house is, you know, Ethereum's definitely sort of on the war path now. You know, I think they recognize that now is like a really critical moment for our entire industry and the Ethereum ecosystem. And, you know, I've definitely noticed a big sense of urgency from the Ethereum Foundation, increased engagement with like teams in the wider ecosystem, making sure that we all stay really close when it comes to standardizing how ZK will be enshrined into Ethereum. There are all sorts of requirements about like what they want to see in terms of like open sourcing, the level of security, and so on. So it's very much like a close partnership and dialogue with all of us.
Yeah, that's super great.
We you know, we put out this market map today. It's essentially the based rollup market map, and you guys are helping incorporate ZK into a lot of those rollups. Mm-hmm. What exactly is the way in which ZK can support based rollups? Is there anything specifically about based rollups that ZK is able to implement and upgrade as a result of it being based and not just, some other optimistic rollup that's transitioning to ZK?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think there are potentially a lot of interesting designs here, and I think it can be fairly heterogeneous. So I saw that you guys had Simon from Rhea on earlier today, and he has a big post about like the architecture for the Rhea chain, and in his case, he has like these prover nodes in the design to make sure that as he and his team are making the transition to a based app chain, that all the activity is being ZK proven correctly to make sure that the execution, the sequencing, is happening as intended. So that is one example of a design that could work. But yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting potential use cases here.
Yeah, man. I'm curious about some of the proving network economics. I saw recently you guys put a post with regards to, I think it was $1 million of revenue generated, or some quantity of revenue generated by the proving networks. We're very deeply in the practical era of crypto now. We're on week 10 of the revenue meta. If you've seen those antics. Talk to us about the Succinct business model and the proving network business model. How does this work in terms of economies of scale? If let's say we assume, thousands and thousands of chains, or just, different types of applications which require proving, how do you guys kind of navigate this to create a large economy of scale?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, I would say we're definitely very commercially minded and intentional about how we think about the prover network and its economics. Because as you can imagine, it's a multi-sided marketplace where, on the one hand, we're working with applications, including rollups and other products to drive proving demand. But we also are sending this traffic to our ecosystem of third-party provers who can offer the cheapest possible proving cost, because they have differentiated pricing in terms of, the GPUs that they can access. Some of these teams are in Asia, for instance, and have done a lot of optimization, stuff like that. And we also have to make this network work for all of our partners. So when we work with Conduit and all these other RAS providers, they have to also participate in this ecosystem and get paid for the work that they're doing. So we very much treat it as this sort of a greenhouse that we need to cultivate. So I think a big part of that is bringing sort of proving activity from our sort of enterprise prover today into this decentralized prover network. And from there, as the economics of the overall network improve, we're just going to see more demand from provers to participate, more interest from RAS providers and other distribution partners to actually sell ZK to all of their customers. So it's very much this virtuous cycle where all of these players need to get involved for it to be successful.
So on the supply side, you're saying that right now that there's this enterprise grade prover from Succinct, and you guys are transitioning this into more of a network of provers, building out a community that's all proving all of the order flow, all of the proof flow that you guys are sending to your network.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, as you can imagine today, today, many of our enterprise customers have very strict requirements around SLAs and stuff like this. So it's actually a real problem if one of these third-party provers drops proof, doesn't respond in time, because it's impacting real customers and real chain operations. So we're just being very mindful as we do this migration to make sure that none of these production teams have any downtime or experience any disruption. And we're definitely carefully monitoring which of the third-party provers are performing the best in terms of their ability to serve these proofs. And yeah, it's something that we care a lot about.
And what's the incentive to decentralize that supply side? Because my intuition says look, you guys have the prover, you guys could, provide all the proofs, right? And then that way you're assured that, you're meeting all the customer demand. What is the incentive to include more provers in the network? Yeah,
it's a great question. So today, there are definitely some like hard limits on our ability to like access compute and GPUs directly. So as you can imagine, like, we work with Amazon Web Services as a vendor. They only have so many GPUs that are like available for us to like borrow or like reserve. And as you can imagine, like as these thousands of chains come online, hopefully the sort of demand for the GPU capacity will quickly outstrip what Amazon has available for just the synced. So like it's really important for us to like bring in a diversity of provers who have access to like different types of hardware. So for instance, like many of these third-party proving teams, were formerly involved in like Bitcoin mining operations. So they have like a bunch of GPUs sort of lying around, and they're sort of looking for new ways to like monetize that compute infrastructure that they've built up over the years. And like this is a really interesting opportunity, like a way for them to get a return on that capacity that they have.
Interesting. And also just for the sake of, I mean, the ethos of decentralization, of providing this kind of like global distributed set of basically hardware, like hardware acceleration across the board.
Yeah, for sure. And there's definitely like a bit of like a 𝘠𝘪𝘵𝗏 style narrative here. It's really fascinating. But yes, like I think the global distribution of the compute capacity is like really important because, as you can imagine, like some of these institutions in the future might have like very particular requirements about like how they're served in terms of proving demand. So people might want some level of distributed systems serving their proving volume, but they also might really care about proofs being served from certain jurisdictions like the US or the EU. And I think like the more provers we can bring online, the more we can offer this sort of feature as well to institutions.
One last one for you, Edward. What is the bull and bear case for Succinct's prover network next like couple years? Like, let's say we have an amazing growth and a, kind of like not so amazing growth. What are your bull and bear cases?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So I think the bull case is definitely every rollup becomes a ZK rollup on a sort of fast time horizon. So we're certainly optimistic that, especially with teams like Off-Chain Labs going all in, that this is just yet another proof point that this is the inevitable future. And like once a couple of these big teams and ecosystems move on, I think it'll be a signal to other teams building the ecosystem that, hey, this is the future, the time is now. I think the bear case would be, obviously like some rollups are much larger than others. They have a lot more TVL at risk. So for instance, with a team like Base, for instance, they're going to have like many requirements. And I imagine that like the process of them getting comfortable with ZK and making sure that there's the appropriate redundancies in place. Maybe they need like, multiple prover systems or some sort of like hybrid model in the interim. Like as they figure out like what makes sense for them, there's a chance that path will take longer than anticipated. So I think that would be the bear case.
Edward, man, I appreciate your time. Looking forward to seeing how some of these ZK systems are applicable into this base/native future that Ethereum seems to be going down. I think the big why here is trying to evade the typical blockchain trilemma of trade-offs. And it does seem like some combination of using Ethereum for sequencing, using super performant DA, using ZK, having that composability with the L1 all in one kind of bundled together. We get to a really nice, quote unquote end game here. So yeah, man, appreciate you sharing some insights.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. And yeah, ZK is the end game, baby. Let's make it happen.
There we go.
Let's go.
All right, Edward. Enjoy your day, man. Cheers.
Bye.
Peace. Alrighty, guys. ZK. We got another ZK conversation coming up. We're just ripping through here. Guys, if you haven't seen the base rollup market map, it's right there. It's pinned. It's in the comments. Rob, how you feeling, man?
We're halfway through. I got a flashback to when we did our STIP marathon. Shout out to the Arbitrum. Shout out to the Arbitrum community. That was, I think, one of our first marathon streams. And yeah, honestly, those marathon Twitter spaces were the predecessor to our live streams.
Man, I was in Brazil, in North Brazil, in the middle of a tiny little no paved roads area on that stream on my Wi-Fi
look at you now in the Hawaii Penti. Come a long way, Andy.
Bull market, baby. Bull market.
Let's get Jacob up
We got
here.
Jacob up here. Let's get him up. We're going to talk Boundless. We just had Edward from Succinct on. Now we've got Jacob from Boundless, the best friends here. I guess we have a little interesting headline here. I don't know if I did that on purpose, but here we are. Jacob, good to see you, man.
What's up, guys? Very, very classic of me to join a call and he's talking about how he's in the middle of nowhere in Brazil.
Yeah, I mean, that was our last Arbitrum Stip marathon. That was the beginning of the long form, multiple guest Twitter spaces, now streams. But Jacob, pretty pivotal time for Boundless right now. Catch us up for those who are new to Boundless, for those who are familiar but just want a quick update as to where you guys are at. Catch us up, and then we'll dive into some of the base rollups, ZK combination.
Yeah. So quick introduction. I'm Jacob. I'm product lead at Boundless. Boundless was incubated by Rizero to really just be this really easy to deploy on ZK infrastructure stack. We had invented the general purpose ISA ZK VM, write a high level language. Most people use Rust. And you can develop ZK applications instead of having, a PhD in cryptography. Problem is it's easy to develop, but to deploy is still quite difficult. And that's where we wanted to do with Boundless, really get it down to, sort of think of like 30-day turnaround where, you can commit 2 engineers and deploy something in production, regardless of where you are. A few weeks ago, we launched mainnet beta around the signal. It's been amazing. We've scaled the market to the largest throughput of any prover network, over 70 trillion cycles yesterday. There's over 3,000 provers online. Most of them I don't even know. I was just looking at we just kicked off season 2 of Prover Incentives last week. And out of the top 25 provers in season 2, only 2 of them are from season 1. So we're really seeing, I sort of related to early Bitcoin mining days, a lot of MEV games being played. It's really insane to see the competition that's going on. And yeah, we're just, starting to prove more chains. And clearly, we did a community sale last week, had an insane turnout, over 71 million pledged.
Wow.
For the token across 21,000 people.
Wow.
And then, mainnet's up.
You guys were trying to raise 4 million?
Yeah, we initially had set it to 4 million at, I would say very favorable terms, right? We wanted to focus on getting the community. We really wanted to reward those that have, been aligned with us for multiple months at each other. Cool thing is, we ran this like signal campaign a few months ago. 17K of them participated in the token sale and got their like max allocation. Cool. So we ended up giving, super wide distribution. And then ended up, we wanted to keep it at 4, but we felt that these people deserve to get in. They deserve that opportunity to buy in. So we had to expand it to 14 just to get to a number.
Oh, so you did end up increasing it to 14 million.
Yeah, if we kept it at 4, no one was going to get anything. It was super great to see the hype and the interest. But I didn't want someone that, had participated for 3-4 months and really contributed to our success to walk away with, $100. We wanted it to be fair, and we think we got to achieve that. So
would you say you guys are pretty much all systems go? What's left on the checklist?
Yeah, I mean, we need to launch our novel incentive program. At this point in mainnet beta, we actually suggest that partners can start to use the system. We're pretty decentralized at this point, like over 3,000 provers. Some random prover just did like 7 trillion cycles yesterday. I have no idea. I have no idea who this person is. I actually, I was just checking, and again, right, we've had almost 95% turnover rate on provers, not because provers shut down, because they're getting out competed by other random people. And we just need to launch the novel incentive program and prove verifiable work, which comes with the token, and then that we'll consider
beautiful.
That
and so curious as to, maybe you could just explain this churn that you're talking about. You're describing it as something that's very bullish, right? And so why is this turnover from these provers so important?
Yeah, we are hyper capitalist here at Boundless, and open markets always win. Proving is a commodity. If you are distributing proofs to the, not the most competitive prover, right? Like, let's say like another prover can do 10 cents and I'm giving it to someone that's going to do 50 cents just to keep them online. This is called a planned economy. The Soviet Union tried it. Certain dynasties in China tried it. It doesn't work for commodities. Has never worked. It always ends up just adding efficiencies and doesn't actually achieve any decentralization. It always ends up the market games it. So why is it so bullish that we're seeing so turnover? It's because these new people are just doing it for cheaper. They're doing it faster for cheaper, and you're really just seeing this open market. You can throw it back to the early MEV days where you had people doing simple arbitrage of like Bitcoin is 10K on one exchange, on another exchange it's 9,500. We're now seeing that with proving infrastructure, with compute providers, and it's all just for the benefit of the consumer, right? Like, you're just getting your proofs cheaper and faster.
And so do you anticipate the consolidation of the market around a few key provers, since they have access to cheap compute, they have access to GPUs, they can serve these proofs at the lowest price?
Yeah, I expect that consolidation one day. Typically in every commodity market, you're going to see it end up being 4 or 5 parties. You see that with Bitcoin mining. You see that with any United States futures commodity market, really, as well. And that's the reality. It's not going to happen for a bit. So this is one of my favorite stories to tell. We finished up season 1 of Prover Incentives. First place last season was an 18-year-old from Germany, 3 weeks removed from graduating high school. And
that guy's about to have the airdrop of his life. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Welcome to crypto, buddy.
And like, this guy, he hustled. He told me that, like, he had done his friend a favor to get access to some spare machines he had in a cloud provider. Like, really just scrappy story. And there was significant, like, really sophisticated parties, right? Like, the top Bitcoin pool person who does the most Bitcoin hashes every day was participating, and all the large validators were participating. And it really just shows how inefficient and why you have to do an open market, because there are these people that will come in and just like cook, man. And these people are dropping the auction time down to like 150 milliseconds at times, something I didn't think was possible.
Wow.
It's just really cool to see. And we've got a Discord going for these people, and it's really cool to see the collaboration as well, right? These people are winning and sharing their strategies as well, and we're just going to succeed more and more with this type of behavior.
What's the dimension for a strategy to outcompete another? Like, how does an 18-year-old from Germany who's able to get access to some, compute in the cloud, how are they able to compete with the largest Bitcoin miner in the world? What's the dimension that they innovate on?
Yeah, so there's like a few things. Obvious one's going to be like electricity cost, how much you're getting the machine. 4090s are so good on our system, and you can really find like a glut of them at a really cheap price. I've seen some prices on some cloud providers for as low as 20 cents, which is really insane. The second is bidding strategies. So with our proving node, you have the proving cluster, right, which is this open, or this is public sort of code base where you can spin up a set of 100 GPUs with ease. But you also have a broker part of that proving node where you're setting your strategy, setting your price. A bunch of people have modified it at this point, and like, we're currently running most of the orders on base mainnet, and there's flash blocks, and they've like co-located their node to base's AWS instance and are sniping like orders via like the next flash block. I saw one order get locked in 50 milliseconds. So there's a lot of stuff of like locking. There's still sort of more supply than demand on the market, and we're constantly ramping up. I said we hit 70 trillion cycles the other day. So a lot of those timing games are important right now.
So Jacob, this is the based Rollup, Ethereum's based native Rollup stream today. It's a marathon, and we dropped the market map. Obviously, you guys fall within the ZK proving category, which is quite broad. But talk to us about your vision for incorporating Boundless into some of these based Rollup designs. Where do you see specific improvements to be made? And perhaps we could even start, talking about something like what you guys have done with 𝘱𝑗_𝘓𝑚 and the 1 hour ZK finality, which kind of, you know, renders optimistic rollups obsolete. Kind of how are you thinking about, you know, risk zero boundless as this kind of neutral proving layer for connecting some pre-comps, Ethereum L1 and rollups together?
Yeah, one unique aspect of boundless really is that we come to you, right? We want to be this like universal proving infrastructure, which means you got to go to your customer, right? We're not asking you to bridge to an L2 or use our token for payment. We really try to just co-locate where you exist. And for these based rollups, it's going to be Ethereum L1. You know, one really cool thing we can do is sort of, okay, you have your settlement contracts. We actually just deploy one more contract. You deposit some ETH in it, and now you've got proving infrastructure. We haven't talked about it much. Internally, we refer to it currently as like automatic prover markets. But essentially, we can automate all of your infrastructure. And on top of this, you know, these based rollups don't only just get the best price. Currently, we're the most price efficient out there, or, you know, a really strong guarantee that your proof is generated. We can actually start to guarantee that your proofs get delivered to your application, to where you're having to just run less infrastructure. Our operational overhead for integrating with Boundless is quite low because we can pay provers on delivery of the proof, not just generation of the proof. So you are just gonna, as a based rollup, okay, you're on ETH-L1, you're using it for sequencing, okay, strip the provers of any right of sequencing because you want to capture that value yourself. And then ask for the proof and you're hands off, right? Like it's just going to show up to your application just as you use AWS today, right? You're going to show up to AWS, you're going to choose an instance, your website is going to go. Same with Boundless today. You're going to write your program, you're going to choose your instance on Boundless, and your application is just going to go as simply as depositing some ETH that you're already using to pay for fees.
Okay, so from a more technical perspective, how do you see base rollups changing what you guys, or like maybe the better question is like, okay, you Boundless can provide X, Y, and Z for traditional single sequencer rollups. What can Boundless provide for base rollups?
Yeah, I think it's the complete like just set of services. Honestly, probably is a little like simpler with base rollups, just given how tight they are. You know, we're already doing the proving for 𝘬𝘳𝘁, which is, you know, I believe is the first based rollup. But really just giving them this full stack proving infrastructure where you're just not worrying about it. It's fully decentralized from the get-go. It's, you know, open. There's no central party that can stop your proof from showing up. We're the only, you know, offering like that on the market right now. So, you know, you're probably becoming a base rollup because you want like, you know, more decentralization and a tighter integration with Ethereum L1, and Boundless provides first-class support for that trade-off you're already willing to do.
All right, well, we've got the Boundless community in here. I can tell we've got some people quote tweeting, retweeting, commenting. They want to know about ZKC, ticker ZKC. You've been tweeting ticker ZKC. I've never seen you tweet a ticker in my life. Been following you for like 3 years. Something's changed. I told Rob, I was like, Rob, I'm going to tweet tickers of majors going on for the rest of this bull market. I know it's not the vibe, but I'm telling you, this is how crypto Twitter works in the bull, in the late stages of the bull. You just tweet tickers. I'm saying I'm doing something different than what you're doing, but we're doing the same thing. When it comes to ZKC, you know, you've been hinting at it. Maybe not about the timing or the mainnet or all of that. I think we can, you know, assume sometime in the coming weeks to months, but when you're thinking about a token to be the basis, to be the bet on Ethereum's proving economy, let's say, you know, what are we thinking about as the business model, the sustainable, you know, revenue model for a proving network like Boundless? How do you see this kind of playing out for ZKC? Basically, tell the community why ZKC is not just another, you know, valueless governance token.
Yeah. Wow, there's a lot to touch on. First, anything I say is my personal opinion. I'm really proud that we're going to launch with governance day one on Boundless. When I say it's fully decentralized, I mean the bus factor day one is not us. The core team at Boundless Network, which is the new, you know, development company for Boundless Foundation and the Boundless Network. If we get hit by a bus day one, it will still work day two, right? You know, development might slow. We're doing a lot of that right now, and we're happy to get open contribution. But I had a really proud moment about a week and a half ago. Our AWS infrastructure went down for 6 hours. We had 0% downtime on request. We had 0% impact on the customers that are live on Boundless today, which is just sick. We have removed ourselves from the critical path. Of course, we still own some contracts, and we're going to relinquish that control with governance at the beginning. So really, really cool about that. Why does ZKC matter for the proving economy, for Ethereum and really beyond? One, as proving demand goes up, those people generating the proofs are going to want to have the token to capture the novel incentive mechanism we have. Additionally, ZKC is used to secure the delivery of proofs. Pretty proud to say that we're the only sort of prover network right now that has economic security when delivering proofs. Our slashing is live today. You can go on our Explorer and see it in action. I think over like 10K USD has been slashed for the past few weeks. Going live to mainnet, that will be ZKC instead of USDC. We sort of need an independent asset for decentralization reasons. And then lastly is, we can not only incentivize proving of blockchain applications, we can actually go further and start incentivizing, proofs of Web 2 applications. Anyone that generates a proof for Reciro, as long as they hold, or sorry, oops. Anyone that holds ZKC and stakes it on the Boundless network is eligible for the incentive. So even if I'm using my browser and I generate a proof, if I stake some ZKC, I can start to capture some of that incentive. So it's really blockchain and beyond with ZKC.
You guys just put out a graphic on the Boundless account just now. Let me pull it up just to kind of further confirm to the community and to ourselves exactly how this works. So protocol staking with ZKC is permissionless participation, which meets economic alignment. If you're running a prover, you stake the ZKC to signal your proving capacity to the Boundless network. So, I have 5 5090s back here in Hawaii because I'm running local LLMs because I don't trust Sam Altman. I stake ZKC, I signal my amount of hardware. And basically, as proof demand grows, provers can stake more and more ZKC, and the entire Boundless ecosystem gets stronger. What is the, for example, when you in like a data availability layer, you stake the token to basically fight data withholding attacks. When you stake ZKC, what are you fighting against? Like, what are you trying to prevent or have a fallback or a slashing for? Or what is the malicious behavior? Or it's oftentimes not even malicious, it's just somebody fucked up. What are you trying to prevent?
Yeah, so there's 3 things here. I'll start with the most boring and then go to the most exciting. First of all, is governance. We're not going to say that governance is a use case without actually launching it, and we're launching it day one. Token holders will be able to vote on proposals day one, which I think is pretty sick. And you do have to protect against that. A lot of people don't because it's not actually governance, but we will have it. We want to get out of the way. So there's that. Second is, the slashable amount within a proof. If I'm, a Rollup with 100 mil TVL, I want to guarantee that my proof is going to show up. There's timing games to be played. It's not nice. So I'm going to require, someone to put a slashable amount down, right? So let's say the proof is worth $10. We currently suggest that people will make that slashable amount $100. You can imagine with some of these larger TVL rollups that are definitely considering becoming, ZK rollups, imagine like a Arbitrum 1 or a base, I might tell them to put it at 5K, right? And, if the prover doesn't show up, that's a substantial amount of money that's going to get slashed and burned. And then the third thing is, with two-sided markets, you need to smooth the supply and the demand, right? With supply, if there's not enough demand, they're going to turn off. So we want to keep an incentive to make sure a certain number of machines actually stay online, as demand is going to be volatile for any market at the beginning. And on the flip side, if we incentivize that supply is online, you're also going to get demand to show up. Demand is not going to just come if there's no one to do the work. A great example of this that we use all the time is Uber. So if you showed up and you wanted to use Uber, I don't know, launched like 7 years ago or something, and there was no riders, you're probably never using the app again, okay? I know that I get wary of using Uber if like it just takes 10 minutes for the person to arrive. So that would be a big
That's
problem.
New York.
Yeah, we want to make sure that like supply is there and ready for the demand. So really that cold start problem that people always talk about a token doing.
And so if you were to put kind of like more emphasis on one side of the marketplace or the other, would you say that it's the supply side or the demand side that, you know, could use some more attention?
Yeah, you know, we've spent a lot of time bootstrapping supply. You know, it's hard to tell. You can ask people today, but I think we've got over 5,000 GPUs online, cooking. Yeah, it's just insane growth there. And now I'm really focused on the demand side after mainnet. I think we've got a really good, go-to-market strategy right now. There's we've been saying that you should prove your chain for like a year now, right? And how many people are proving their chain? Not many. I think we've, really developed a good list of like why people actually want to prove their chain, and the dollars make sense. If proving costs 10K, but I can save you 20K, per month, which proving is cheaper than that, by the way. Let's say proving is 1K a month, and I can save you 20K in bridging and integration and all this sort of thing. You're going to prove. And I think we've reached that tipping point. And this isn't just for L2s. I think a common misconception is people think that L2s are the TAM. That's just not true. There are reasons to prove L1s as well. And we're starting to see that adoption. We kicked it off with Ethereum.
Yeah, the signal.
With the full consensus proofs, which are sick. They're running in production right now. People are using them. But we're going to start doing more L1s. People saw that and really got interested. And yeah, I'm pretty stoked. The internal memo right now is we're just going to prove every chain. It's going to happen. Join us or get out of the way. It could happen, as soon as 18, 24 months, every chain.
Road to mainnet. Jacob, thank you for joining us on the Space Rollup stream. I know it's going to be a long couple of weeks into Q3 or into the end of the year, but really just into the next couple of months. So heads down, and looking forward to seeing Boundless mainnet and getting more and more ZK out there in the world. So thanks for joining us, man.
Yeah. You know what ticker to tweet, Andy.
Yeah, there you go. All right, buddy. See you soon.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Hey, Jacob.
Alrighty.
Some ZK wisdom.
Yeah,
being
man.
shared with us today.
That was a nice little ZK double segment there.
Yeah.
I think we're going to switch it up a bit. We got Mara and Sriram, which more than base rollups, we're going to take a bit of a break from the technical base rollup stream. We're going to talk about Ethereum staking, DATs, ETFs, where this yield's coming from, who's staking, why they're staking, what's going on. So Mara is one of the prominent figures at Alluvial. Alluvial is a pretty institutional grade staking company for Ethereum. Sriram is obviously the CEO of Eigenlabs, Eigenlayer, restaking, who is getting quite a bit involved in the state of institutional appeal for Ethereum. So I think that's a general direction for this conversation. And yeah, guys, I think we're ready to have them up. I think we've got them both in the back. And yeah, a little break from the base rollups conversation into some more of the Ethereum staking, institutional demand, ETFs conversation here. So we'll get Mara and Sriram up and keep this thing rolling. Guys,
here
welcome
they are.
to the
Welcome
show.
to the show.
Hey, excited to be here. Thanks, Andy.
Yeah, guys, good to have you. Mara, I think it's your first time on, or at least it's been quite some time. Would love to have an introduction for yourself and Alluvial. I think our audience knows Sriram quite well, and then we'll jump in.
That sounds great. Well, thanks for having me, guys. And I think, yes, it is the first time, but excited to be on. My name is Mara. I'm the CEO and co-founder over at Alluvial. I've actually been working now in crypto for the better part of 8 years, mostly focused on staking. As part of Alluvial, we are the development company behind Liquid Collective, enterprise-grade staking standard, supporting institutions and individuals alike to support liquid, flexible, and scalable solutions in the staking market on both Ethereum and Solana. So excited to be here.
Beautiful. And Sriram, welcome back. I think like Andy said, our audience knows you very well. You've been on the show several times, obviously involved in Ethereum staking as well. And so there's a partnership here between Eigenlayer and Alluvial. Maybe you could explain what the relationship is between the two of you.
Yeah, excited to be here. the macro, as all of us know, is that institutions are interested in in the Ethereum ecosystem quite heavily. The whole digital asset treasuries that are being spun up to let people get exposure to ETH, I think, is a big meta. And as you think about institutions that are holding ETH, they're obviously differentiated from holding Bitcoin in holding a productive asset. And so if you look at every DAT, the first three words they use: staking, restaking, DeFi, every Ethereum DAT, right? And it's because that's the real differentiator between an Ethereum and an Ethereum treasury company and a Bitcoin treasury company, because the set of things you could do trustlessly with BTC is very limited. So the base level of what you can do with ETH is to stake in the Ethereum protocol and receive rewards. And so obviously the biggest question that all of these digital asset treasuries are thinking about is, how do I deploy ETH in a secure, compliant, trustworthy manner? And I remember talking to Mara, I don't know, 3 years back now, with this vision of, hey, we want to have institutional grade liquid staking, right? So where you can trust the validators, they are in compliant, regulated, all this kind of stuff. And so obviously using LSTs gives them two things, right? One is it gives them the base level of liquidity, and then it gives them yield that comes from staking. And so combining these two, I think that is the first pillar of a Ethereum DAT, is like, staking to receive the yield. And if it's liquid, you can use eigenlayer in restaking using the ETH to actually do more, right? And so the core idea, the audience may know restaking a bit here, but just to state it, normally what you're doing is you're taking ETH and then staking and then promising you're running the Ethereum protocol correctly. With eigenlayer, you can stake ETH and promise you're running the Ethereum protocol and some other services correctly. So you're receiving those additional baskets from these other things. And that's what I think this partnership is a very natural complement of what we're building. So, eigenlayer itself is not a liquid staking protocol, so we rely on partners to actually do that. And in the context of the institutions, we want to go with the gold standard institutional liquid staking protocol. So that's the kind of like the history of this partnership.
Yeah. And Mara, when you're speaking with these institutional folks on the liquid staking side and on the staking side, what type of appetite are you seeing for the variety of opportunity, whether it be staking directly into the protocol, as Shahram alluded to, liquid staking, maybe depositing on something like an Aave, or even going restaking? Where do you see the appetite for different kind of demographics, and how has your experience been just navigating these waters as the institutional demand has increased quite a bit?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's probably worth just talking about the overarching trend that we're observing, which is institutions are moving beyond passive Bitcoin holdings, period. I think that trend is, largely weaving its way through the industry across a number of different segments. Us, as a more institutional focused product, have obviously been incredibly excited to kind of see this market cycle develop and also hear what, customers are starting to tap into. So we can talk a little bit about digital asset treasuries. There's many other segments that we're starting to see adopting this technology in a more mainstream fashion, whether it's ETFs that are now gearing up for staking approvals in the US, or it's retail platforms and fintechs that are starting to look for optimizations and new product opportunities and surfaces for their retail products. But on the DAT side, I mean, one of the things that I find quite interesting when we talk with a lot of these public companies is how far and how open they are across the spectrum of solutions that are available to them. And for me, it's quite exciting just because we've, in the institutional space, and particularly when we're talking about public, registered, regulated entities, I think this might be the first segment that is, deeply thinking about tapping into the various different opportunities that the on-chain markets make available to them. I think we, generally see, traditional staking is going to be table stakes. I think that's baseline yield generation is going to be table stakes. I think any treasurer, whether we're talking about digital asset treasuries or just corporate treasuries and treasuries in general, that baseline yield is going to be massively important. I think most of the conversations that we're having with a lot of these digital asset treasuries now is about how we layer into additive strategies that increase ETH per share or SOL per share, depending on the products and strategies that people are using, to actually maximize performance relative to the baseline yield that they can generate, on ETH, that 3% that's currently available to them. And so I think, as Sriram said, really does follow a little bit of this pattern where it's, how do I stake? Okay, great. How do I move from just normal staking to actually having the option to do other things? That's where liquid staking becomes massively valuable, because it's programmable and you can start using it in DeFi. And our product is actually QC integrated, and so people can neatly use this product, within the parameters of what's available to them. Restaking is probably the next frontier, where we're starting to see a lot of appetite as people are thinking about, how do I make my ETH more productive, and also how can I continue to create security value for the ecosystem more broadly. But I'm quite excited to hear about people moving into DeFi too. I think we're having probably at least 2-3 conversations about this a day. I think you're starting to see a little bit of a differentiation in terms of people that might be very conservative, whose road into DeFi participation might take a little bit longer, and others that are already very actively starting to layer into these strategies when you start seeing participation, DeFi lending protocols or liquid restaking solutions. And so I think we're going to continue looking to support sort of that broad spectrum as people start layering into these different strategies.
To your point, Mara, there's several variants of yield on chain, even getting more exotic beyond just the liquid staking. Go into DeFi, go into restaking. All of these are towards the goal of increasing Ethereum per share, and that's how these digital asset treasury companies are going to survive. And so I'm curious about the matchmaking process. Like, when you're talking to a registered entity, what is the process of kind of evaluating their risk tolerance? Mm-hmm. And then do you go to someone like Sriram and kind of get his opinion on what sort of AVSs might make sense for this entity to stake into and become an operator? Generally, how are you finding the match, creating those matches between this entity that wants to stake and this yield source on chain?
I mean, we're not a formal advisor, just to flag that, right, in the process. But I think it probably starts a little bit more basic than that conversation. It usually starts with, I need to stake my assets. Okay, what custodians can I use? What node operator should I use on the back end? I think at that point, the security question starts becoming relevant. Okay, multi-operator diversification to ensure that you're mitigating correlated failure risks. Okay, I also want to create additional yield on top of my staking, or at least have the option of being able to generate it later without having to unbond my ETH and wait for 3 weeks to get it back and not earn rewards, which is a huge drag on performance for people. So that's usually when we get into the conversation of, okay, through your qualified custodian, you can have multi-operator diversity using a product like LS-ETH at Anchorage, at Coinbase, at BitGo, wherever you might want to be using it. I think the second part of the process is we're seeing most teams either staff or already have internal folks on their side that are really spending time digging into the DeFi landscape. I think people will probably start with blue chip. I think, no surprises there in terms of what we're most likely to see people really starting with. And I think one of the nice things, and I think, frankly, why we've partnered with the EigenLayer team on this report, is really the education of bringing people along in that journey. What does it mean to use your ETH? Why is it a benefit to participate in restaking? What else can you do in the DeFi landscape? And what is sort of that gradual on-ramp that we can, support people with as they make decisions about what risk-adjusted tolerance and appetite they have in participating in the market?
So you can't suggest exactly what to do, but can kind of show the options and kind of show the risk parameters. Sharona, I'm curious, what is EigenLayer's institutional appeal? What is the next 6 months, 12 months for you guys look like for EigenLayer's institutional push? Like what is it that you guys see you guys can provide? How do you think about operating in this sphere, whether it's with Alluvial or just kind of naturally within the EigenCloud ecosystem? What is the EigenLayer pitch to institutions? Why does that matter?
Yeah, you can think of the like I said, the main 3 things they're thinking about: staking, restaking, DeFi. And when you think about how an institution evaluates these opportunities primarily risk reward, right? So what risk am I taking and what reward am I getting? And the core thing that we built EigenLayer for is opting in and securing more networks and services. And so if you think of what is the additional risk that you're taking operator risk, like that the operator does not run these additional tools and services correctly. So we think basically restaking is the lowest form of additional risk that you can actually take, because it's just additional operator risk on saying, hey, the operator is running Ethereum, they can run 10 other networks and earn additional rewards related to that. So in this like risk reward kind of Pareto curve, we're closer to Ethereum staking than we are to Aave or other financial instruments, where basically what you're doing is underwriting financial or price risk, right? So you're promising that ETH/USD is going to stay solvent at a certain ratio or whatever, right? So that's how we think about it. So we think over time, because the additional risk related to ETH staking is very minimal, we feel like a lot of institutions will naturally use, and take advantage of that. So that's the first point. Second one, EigenLayer did not build, like our own liquid restaking protocol. And this is because we want to give institutions the expressivity to choose their own operator set. So this was an important consideration. And it's kind of great to see this come to reality, right? Because it took us 10x more time to build native restaking than it is to just build deposit and LSD. So there is definitely people who want a lot of control. They can use the eigen pods and the native eigen restaking to actually opt in. That's the second one. Third one is on the DeFi side. Even though our original construction was to support this ecosystem of AVSs, which pretty much all the AVSs today follow this operator and infrastructure execution model, as we introduced in EigenLayer slashing and redistribution, which is the slashed funds, not just burned, the slashed funds can be redistributed to the AVS. Sort of what we're seeing is emergent from the market is people are building things like borrow against your staked ETH positions. You can start doing DeFi more natively on top of EigenLayer. So you have like a staked ETH position in EigenLayer, you can build an AVS, which basically says, if some conditions are not true, I can slash and redistribute the funds back. People are building new kinds of stable coins, new insurance protocols. We had Cap Labs go live with their kind of new stablecoin product, but in general, there's a bunch of new things. There is Opulus, which is built medical reinsurance on top. There is a bunch of these new protocols which are just coming up. It was not the original design for EigenLayer to opt into this more complex pricing risk. But these institutions can choose these graded risks across this portfolio. So we absolutely see this as institutions come in, they want to use something today and then get deeper into the ecosystem. They serve as on-ramps. And maybe they initially just opt into EigenLayer and EigenDA, one AVS, and then they're like, okay, this is interesting. Let's go get additional rewards from doing all these other services. And then they may allocate a portion of their portfolio to more financial actions. But the cool thing is, with this kind of a partnership, you can do all of these kind of inside the ecosystem. So that is something that we're excited about.
So guys, I have a more broad question for you both. And 𝘱𝗠𝘃, I appreciate that. I know you're quite close with Joe Lubin, and I imagine that you guys have had quite a few conversations with regards to SharpLink and potential ways to kind of support them. Recently, I think their premium has eroded quite a bit. So it's just a very interesting financial engineering game happening with regards to how to kind of take the next step to earn more ETH per share. But something that's a bit more systemic that I'm curious about both your opinions on is that, for example, 𝘱𝗠𝘃, EigenLayer used to have one of the largest amount of ETH in a smart contract of anyone, right? It was like Ethereum Foundation, a couple others, and then it was EigenLayer. Now it's we've got SharpLink, ETHZilla, Tom Lee's calling for $64,000 per ETH. He's trying to buy 7% of the supply. Stuff's getting wild out there. I'm curious, from a systemic protocol perspective, as you guys are both deep in the way that the Ethereum protocol design works, is there a systemic risk to some of these institutions owning too much of the Ethereum supply? Or perhaps better asked, how should we be thinking about institutional footholds in the Ethereum network? Because there are pros. They have longer term vision. They don't have weak hands, but there are cons. Perhaps they aren't as aligned with the core values of decentralization, or perhaps they have other agendas and mandates. Maybe you kick us off, Mara. How do you think about this? Maybe we can get some debate going.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think first principles in terms of just how I've looked at this industry is it needs to be adopted holistically and broadly and embedded into financial services across the world. If we accomplish that, we've done a good job really, leading the charge on making on-chain markets, truly be able to harness their potential. And that inadvertently means making sure that solutions are mainstream and accessible to the mainstream markets. And in many ways, we have conduits, incumbents today, we call them institutions or financial players that serve a lot of that market in many different capacities, making it more accessible for people to actually be able to interact with digital assets that may not be in a position to hold them directly on their balance sheets. And we're seeing a lot of that innovation be unlocked in this cycle for many reasons, frankly, because the regulatory floodgates have opened. And we see, particularly in the US, but also abroad, a much more positive and open stance and conducive guidance related to digital assets, whether it's on the stablecoin or staking side, right? And I think that's critically important. Like, to me, when I think about what does the next year or two look like, I want to see broad and holistic digital asset services and on-chain services being integrated into the Robinhoods and the Fidelities and the BlackRocks of the world. And we're not too far away from that, right? And that's the reality. So I do think, from my perspective, these are all really positive developments. I'm frankly happy to see that we're entering an institutional market cycle that is actually creating, in many ways, sort of the ability for us to really, broadly serve this technology to the market. And in many ways, whether we can argue whether or not eventually DATs, when they do accumulate a sufficient amount of assets that could introduce systemic risk right now, I think it's actually, we leave MicroStrategy aside, less than 1% of the entire market cap of crypto that's currently held in DAT. So I think largely still theoretical as a risk, but practically speaking, there are things that are happening that I think is making, this current market, participation incredibly valuable, including the fact that in many ways, having public companies accumulating digital assets is opening the ability for other entities to start acquiring shares and indirect exposure to digital assets. I think you guys had a guest recently that was talking about, what it means for MicroStrategy to end up in the S&P 500 and eventually having this, in people's 401ks. And so I think we're not too far away from that world. And I think that's incredibly, exciting in many ways. So I do, always with caution when it comes to systemic risk and rapid accumulation that is currently creating, certain price dynamics that are positive and can inversely also be negative if things trade below MNAV. But I think overall we're seeing really positive momentum, not just, in broad adoption, but also the regulatory and accounting side, where a lot of things are getting worked through at the moment at a much accelerated pace, because you have important players demanding, the ability to holistically integrate these assets into their strategies and into their treasuries.
Jérôme, anything to add there? It is no longer DeFi yield farming, food farm accountability. It is quite a bit deeper.
I think when you think about like the risks, there are two categories of risks. Firstly, I completely agree with Mara that this is the
come on.
This is the reason we do it is for everybody to come and use it. And if you go like one level deeper on like what the systemic risk could be, right? And the price action is one dynamics that whether one institution accumulating the price, like what dynamics does it lead to? I think that I'm less worried about. Price is what the market kind of like ends up with. So I think it's sometimes people who leverage up based on price dynamics. I think they're the ones, and that's what the market is. So I just accept that. But if you look at like the Ethereum consensus protocol and the whole like things that the EF used to be concerned about, which is, hey, is there a centralization risk vector? Is there control? I think Ethereum, by obsessing about these things quite early when there was really no such risk, actually has built a very anti-fragile system. And I think this is really Ethereum's kind of core value proposition, building 6 5, 6 different execution clients, 5, 6 different consensus clients, building distributed validator technology. Even if it's a single kind of BlackRock controlling 25% of Ethereum supply, they're going to be using all these technologies because now they are at the hot seat. They're going to be legally regulated to do it. They're going to need insurance to do it. When we think about safety, like the financial markets mechanism for ensuring safety and pricing risk is insurance. And so all those pressures kind of going to back propagate into these entities and ensure that all these things actually happen. I think the one dimension which this particular set of things doesn't necessarily solve is censorship resistance and like how much Ethereum can march on just by itself. And even there, I think the Ethereum protocol is designed to be very anti-fragile. Even if like a few percentage of validators are run like around the world, you're going to have inflation from them. The Ethereum protocol is built on this longest chain plus finalization thing. So there's just like layers of checks and balance that Ethereum has built, which is why I think it is well suited to be the backbone of like global finance. So that's always been our bet. And I've always disliked this social layer haggling of like trying to say, oh, you're centralized, you're decentralized. It's a protocol. It's a permissionless protocol, or it's some kind of club. We have to make a decision. It is a permission. That's what it is. It's open for everybody to build. It's open for Eigenlayer. It's open for Lido. It's open for Alluvial. It's open for BlackRock to come and do as they want, because that's what the whole promise of this ecosystem is. I think this is coming because there's a kind of like underlying two different views. One is decentralization versus permissionlessness. I think permissionlessness is the kind of foundational thing. Decentralization is there at all kinds of other levels. There is people monitoring the network. They can fork the network. There's all kinds of other things that keep the network decentralized. So holding and staking can be done at various levels and using these institutions. And I think it's a big net positive for more people to come and access these complex technologies behind known interfaces. That's how I see it.
I couldn't agree more, Sriram. I would argue, when you look at 2021, just after the Beacon chain went live, I mean, through that whole year, the concentration of e-staking was what we would probably call outrageous today. You'd have parties running more than 33% of the network on a single operator. Like those days are like long behind us. And I think to Sriram's point, Ethereum has early on made certain decisions as part of its Serenity spec and also migration to proof of stake to allow decentralization to actually exist as a fundamental element of its architecture, right? Like on Ethereum, people at home can run validators. That was a very intentional design choice, right? Institutions are not prohibited, just as people at home are not prohibited from going and spinning up a node and participating in the network freely. And I think we've started seeing how that's manifested just in when we talk about concentration or decentralization at the staking level. I think we've continuously seen that, Gini coefficient scale into a much more decentralized landscape.
Yeah, Mara, I just want to give you, go ahead, Rob.
I had a little bit of a different question, just to generalize what we're talking about beyond ETH, the asset, and really take into account Ethereum, the protocol, because a lot of the checks and balances you're talking about go beyond just ETH, the asset. And you started out in this report by talking about the macroeconomic environment, and the report is a great read. Just in the first couple of pages, there was one takeaway here that if you take the treasury yield, you subtract inflation, these things are not profitable. And so people are looking for alternative sources of yield. And I understand from what you're suggesting in this report that they can look and find that yield on chain, and that probably comes through stable coins. And so kind of generalizing this discussion beyond ETH, the asset, taking into account stablecoin staking and repurposing and restaking for greater yield. Sriram, how are you incorporating stablecoins into the backbone of the staking infrastructure that you guys have at Eigenlayer? And then maybe Mara following up, like what is the demand ETH versus stablecoins for deploying these things on chain?
Yeah, so in terms of the Eigenlayer protocol, I mean, even though we got associated very strongly with the word restaking, it's a permissionless, generalized, programmable staking environment. You can stake any asset. You can opt into any sets of conditions that you feel like you're. And so the protocol is just enforcing these conditions and ensuring that if an AVS wants to accept USDs, USDC, USDC or some other token, they can accept it and then pay rewards. So that's our kind of generic architecture. It's fully permissionless for protocols to do it. In terms of where we are seeing demand from the ABSs, at this point, people are still just understanding how they build complex infrastructure services on top of EigenLayer. The financial services, it's easier for them to understand, like, whether to use ETH or USDC, because it's kind of like, okay, what's the price, what's the demand, what's the yield? I mean, it's standard equations. Whereas when you're building a new infra protocol like a storage or an AI agent or other complex things, there is different considerations in what is your asset, how is it actually securing your thing. The general thesis that we have there is you want to minimize, especially when you think about it with redistribution. What's happening is the unit of risk that the AVS is underwriting. So the token used for security should be commensurate or similar to the risk that an AVS is underwriting. So think of like a bridge, right? A bridge which is mostly bridging ETH probably wants ETH stake to actually protect it, because it's saying, hey, every week I'm doing 1 million ETH worth of transfers, so I need 1 million ETH of security. Whereas another bridge, which is primarily, or the same bridge with a different asset, like transferring USDC, wants to have USDC to secure the bridge. So this is, I think, going to emerge, but we are still pretty early in this innings of people understanding how to deploy complex infrastructure services, build on top of EigenLayer, use different assets. So we are still in the initial phases, and what we are seeing is people are, okay, there's a lot of ETH in EigenLayer. We mentioned here, Robbie, you were mentioning the DAT sizes, right? So some of the DATs are like, hey, we want to acquire 5% of ETH. And already there is like close to 5% of ETH on EigenLayer. So that's the percent of scale. So because that already exists, there is people want to actually use it. So that's what we're seeing today. But as the kind of like specialization in the market happens, and these are integrated end to end, right? Think of an insured bridge, where every time you're bridging USDC, you have an insurance that, hey, if the operator goes wrong, I'm going to still be solvent because I can slash and redistribute. As those chains get built out, you will see the specialization in, okay, I'm transferring USDC, I want USD collateral. So,
got it. Yeah, and Mara, just curious from your side, any significant demand that you're seeing to deploy stablecoins into these yield sources on chain?
I mean, I think there's a tremendous amount of potential for yield-bearing stablecoins. I think we should not be underestimated the potential of what that's gonna be able to offer in the market holistically and the demand behind it. I think when I think about staking, and one of the reasons why I think it's becoming increasingly interesting as a collateral and as a treasury asset for institutions is because the nature of the yield is quite different. And what I mean with that is it's truly the first internet native yield that exists that is globally uncorrelated, right? It is fully independent from inflation or monetary and sovereign policy, which makes it a really good alternative income product, right? And I think that framing is what we're hearing: portfolio diversification, hedging, alternative income strategies, tying to staking rewards and staking yield is a fundamental sort of reason why we're seeing an increase and uptick in appetite and interest. And that's inherently different, right? From tokenizing dollar value and then also being exposed to the potential inflations and other pressures that come with the monetary policies and its purchasing power in the market. And so when you look at the report that we wrote, one of the reasons why we took such a big lens into the market is because sometimes I think it's hard to see the forest for the trees. And right now, lots of corporate treasury talk, $20 billion in ETH being acquired by public companies. Like there's a lot of that sort of meme culture and storytelling and narrative that's currently driving this market cycle. But when you start pulling these things apart, I think what we're starting to see is people are moving away and have already bought into the thesis of having Bitcoin as a key, part of their portfolio diversification. And the market is catching up holistically and broadly to the fact that ETH in particular offers an opportunity to move beyond passive holding and passive strategies, because that infrastructure, that opportunity to earn and participate is natively built into the protocol, and because a lot of the activity that is taking place in the market right now is actually happening on top of Ethereum as a network. And so you have this sort of convergence of things where you have an incredibly powerful tool creating internet native yield through Ethereum staking, and that being natively baked into the product. And then you have the world's largest asset managers and banks and financial institutions tokenizing treasuries and stocks and stable coins on top of the network, securing trillions in value. And I think that's really like the fundamental shift that we're seeing right now. And so, kind of zooming out, I've always seen these as complementary strategies. To me, dollar-based yield and T-bills and, a lot of the fixed income strategies that people participate in will eventually be complementary to internet native yield that is going to be fully uncorrelated. And I think that's the future that we're really seeing unfold at the moment.
Wow. I think I just bought more ETH.
One really interesting, or at least a story that people are telling right now is, hey, it's why do you need, these digital native assets? Maybe it's just stablecoin rails. That's what blockchains are. In some sense, Solana is leaning more in this kind of a thesis. Hey, who can help transfer stablecoins fast? I think there is an issue that I think there's a second order game here. When you think about countries, like for a different country other than the US, maybe people want to access USDC. Like right now, it's an interesting, useful opportunity for them. But as you think about like this proliferates more, this is a major counter-sovereignty risk for a different country. It just piss off somebody in the US, and then your USD suddenly went to zero, and the US has demonstrated that this is how things are going to be. And so if you take the second order game, what's going to happen is like the legal conditions under which you can hold USD stables in outside the United States is going to get restricted. And so what's going to take its place is ETH. Like that's our bet on the Ethereum ecosystem. And when people are thinking right now, it's just stablecoin adoption and like just rails for stablecoins, actually that's not that interesting, right? It's just like Stripe. It's just a business. It's just helping people transact tokens around, as opposed to a completely internet native, digital, self-enforcing, verifiable economy that we're bootstrapping. And I think that's definitely has been in the Ethereum ethos. I think over time, as we kind of index on the stablecoins, I think of this as the gateway drug.
Yes.
People are going to get into.
I had this tweet that got a lot of flack that was like, it was like hot take. Stablecoins are absolutely amazing in the short term, but very destructive in the long term. And it comes from a very cyberpunk, anti-fiat kind of mentality that a lot of us have came from in the way that I think we got into the space, or at least have some inkling of that kind of understanding, but have kind of been blindsided by the positive perception boost that stablecoins have done for our space. It's been immensely helpful, but must remember the long-term game here. So I appreciate that, 𝘗𝘁𝗍𝗏. And Mara, thank you for your time as well, guys. It's been an amazing segment. We're running a based Rollup marathon live stream today, so we're gonna have to hop back to that. Got a couple more guests left, but thank you guys so much. This was extremely insightful.
Thank you so much, Andy.
Thanks for having us, guys.
Alrighty.
Thanks, y'all. See you
Enjoy
next
the
time.
rest of the day.
Bye-bye.
Hi, you too.
You as well. Alrighty, that was awesome. I'm super bullish on ETH after that. Can't wait to sell more in the next couple weeks.
I think the right framing for what we ended up talking about there was like stablecoins are the Trojan horse, and then inside this Trojan horse is like ETH and Bitcoin as the reserve asset. Like,
well, they're like the Trojan horse for now, but the end game is not, as Shriram said, the end game is not like, let's just pass around US dollars on chain and call it a day.
Not even interest bearing like stable coins on chain.
Yeah.
No.
The end game is those algo stables, wherever those are going to come from.
Boy, I don't think you
But
want,
I guess
your
the end
portfolio
game,
doesn't want those back.
I guess we don't need that. Shriram's more like, look, ETH is that. But until Bitcoin and ETH get to a point where even the S&P, people don't transact in the QQQ, because that thing can go up and down 1% or 2% each day. You know, there's a reason, right? And so, yeah, I mean, look, we can go on for a while. We got Emmett ready to go. He's been waiting. It's late in London. That's on us. This has been a marathon. This has been a technical endeavor so far. Honestly, we've been crushing. So I'm stoked. Let's get Emmett up. And yeah, we'll continue the based rollups marathon with Emmett, the co-founder of 𝘬𝘪𝘴𝘬. And yeah. How you feeling, Rob?
I'm feeling good. Emmett, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you on. Maybe we'll just close the loop on the previous conversation. Do you think the end game for currencies to transact is stablecoins, ETH, or Bitcoin?
I mean, if you go back to Bitcoin's thesis, right, it's always about, you know, peer-to-peer money or decentralized cash. Sadly, because of volatility, it never will become a cash. That's you know, we have learned that over the last, I don't know, 5-10 years or so. And so, yeah, stablecoin is definitely the path towards this, whatever you can call the decentralized version of cash in some sense. And again, there with all sorts of caveats around, okay, who is issuing this stablecoin? Is it Circle? Is it Tether? Or is it MakerDAO, now renamed something else? And then, you know, you could debate about all of that, but I do still feel like stablecoin is the version that is going to be adopted. Bitcoin or even Ethereum, to be very frank, will never be a cash because of volatility. And one thing that, you know, to extend this argument, you could see that up until recently, very recently, we were thinking about stablecoin as a currency that you would use in day-to-day payments, right? Where you take your stablecoin and go to your neighboring supermarket and try to pay in stablecoin, and the merchant would accept that stablecoin. That was kind of the vision, at least. And that hasn't happened so far. But the good news is that because of all these crypto debit cards, like Rain, for example, has done tremendously good work. And they recently, by the way, did a very good fundraiser. So congratulations to them. And what basically they have shown that you actually, there's a middle ground in some sense, where the merchants don't have to change their internal dynamics. They don't have to change their behavior, and they could still keep on accepting, you know, fiat. And yet on the other side, which is the user, they can continue using stablecoin. And behind the scenes, they will do all the conversion. So you as a user, you will never see a fiat in your account, and the merchant will never see stablecoin in their account.
Yes.
And yet the stablecoin becomes the real. So in a way, we have found that middle ground that actually now I use crypto debit card for almost every single transaction that I do. And my banking transactions have almost gone to zero.
Yes.
And so this is certainly a change that we could not have imagined, I don't know, 5-10 years ago. So that's definitely a plus. Now,
do you use
again,
the Ether?
About this.
Do you use the EtherFi card?
No, I'm using Cypher, but I plan to go Ether card as well.
Cool. No, because I mean, we were talking to one of the Dragonfly partners, I believe, about Rob, about how Stripe's L1 with their acquisition of Bridge, with their acquisition of Privy, with them launching their own stablecoin and them launching their own chain, they're going to create a system such that you never have to actually have money in your bank account. You just have a Stripe account, a Stripe wallet on the chain. You can transact, go to the grocery store, buy on that Stripe card or whatever it is, and the money actually never touches the bank that you have. Now, maybe it goes to the bank of whomever is receiving the payment, but yeah, this is kind of what you're getting to. Now, this is obviously Stripe's L1. We want to get this to Ethereum, but at the end of the day, I think you're spot on here.
So, by the way, to mention kind of a very similar example to Stripe, something that's live today, which is Revolut, right? Revolut is a neobank, a challenger bank, and they have this pretty cool feature where you have this banking application, like full banking application, integrated right alongside a crypto application. So basically, you have this fiat on-ramp, off-ramp services right within the same app. So, for example, if you want to buy Bitcoin using cash, it's sitting in your bank account. You just click and say, okay, I want to buy Bitcoin, and you press a button, you have Bitcoin right there. And then you want to go the other way around, you say, okay, I want to sell my Bitcoin, give me my money, and the money directly goes into your bank account. So one single place you can do off-ramping, on-ramping without ever leaving that application. Now imagine if you had something, this is kind of what I guess Stripe is trying to achieve, is like once you have, like, let's say Revolut-like stablecoin, then you can do all of that using a stablecoin as well. So that's tremendously powerful. Like I use Revolut. Again, you could debate about the fees and everything that goes with it, But for a moment, if you ignore the fees, it's actually a really good user experience in my view.
Yeah. Well, Emmett, we wanted to get you on today. I would love to talk about stablecoins further, but it is the based rollup day. We're celebrating Ethereum's. We dropped this market map. Ethereum's going based. Ethereum is back. I mean, I don't know how. I think technically we still have a lot of development to do, but at least Tom Lee is throwing clips into our bags, so you can smile. Yes. So alt layer, base rollups, Ethereum. Let's kind of get into some of the nitty gritty here. I think one of the cool things that you guys have recently done is you integrated Gattaca's base stack into alt layer. I'm curious kind of like how you see that improving security and trust guarantees that developers and users would get compared to like single sequencers. Kind of like how does this collaboration boost your security for alt layer chains, alt layer rollups? Walk us through some of this.
Of course. So, by the way, let me give you some context behind this. Like when I think the base rollup was, initially announced by or proposed by Justin Drake in one of its blog posts, and since then we have been kind of digging into base rollups in different flavors. So, one of the first attempts that we did to kind of implement a version of base rollups was through this restaked rollups. And why we went through that direction is because if you read through Justin's blog post, towards the end, he mentions about, okay, if you use one of the downsides of a based rollup is like it becomes slightly more complicated to implement different kinds of sequencing policies. So for example, Arbitrum has the sequencing policy of first come, first serve, at least up until recently. And that kind of policy or a different policy would be a little bit more difficult to implement unless you have like some sort of a middleware network of these L1 validators that opt into that specific sequencing policy. So what we said that one way to circumvent that is to build like a restaked rollup where your sequencers are basically restaking ETH and they decide to become your sequencer, and then you could implement whatever sequencing policy you have. So it's kind of like a sidecar to a proper base sequencing, but it gives you the benefits, so that it kind of circumvents the limitations that you have with base sequencing. Anyway, so this is kind of this initial our venture into base rollups. And of course, as you said earlier, we have been working very closely with Gattaca recently, which is basically a project by Titan, which is one of the biggest, if not the biggest builder in the Ethereum ecosystem. And before talking about the security and decentralization, which of course it's important, but people often care about, okay, I don't care about decentralization, I care about performance, right? That's often comes out, especially if you compare with Solana, speed and performance. And to be honest with you, when we built out and when we tested this integration of Gattaca internally, and we wanted to present to a client, which we did, the client, unfortunately, I can't name them because of NDA, but the client was really shocked with the speed that they saw. Because the Gattaca has this pre-confirmation built in, so we actually had to take a Ravvi wallet and kind of had to integrate their pre-confirmation module in that Ravvi, and you could see that your transactions is like cannot even it's so fast that you won't even realize it's actually even being processed, right? It's really fast. So this aspect of people, feeling like, are we going to match Solana's speed? Are we going to match, these speeds that are coming up or for competing chains? That definitely is going to be settled. You could see that. And literally, Spire Labs, I think recently posted, or M Team from Spire Labs posted, you will see microsecond block time or transaction speed coming up, and which is actually coming up. And we have experienced that ourselves with Gattaca, and I'm pretty sure you'll see that with Spire Labs as well. So that's on the performance side. So you definitely can match anything or probably even be better than Solana speed. On the decentralization component, especially the liveness component, which we have seen, by the way, even in established rollups like Optimism, Arbitrum, there have been instances where the sequencer was down because of AWS outage and so on. And that kind of goes away immediately because you're relying on an L1 sequencer, so you get that benefit. And that's especially important for time-sensitive transactions, especially in the world where we live right now, where perp dexes are dominating the world. You want to make sure that liquidations happen properly, and if your sequence is down, your transaction will not get processed. And so it's important to have those liveness guarantees, and that comes natively if you use based sequencing. And then, of course, that also gives you all the security benefits that you get from this. So, for example, let's say in the current centralized sequencing model, in most cases, there's one foundation that's running the sequencer, or you have a RAS partner like AllPlayer that's running a sequencer. And again, there have been instances where for whatever reasons, the sequencer was down, and then you're basically, the chain is stuck. People are not able to send transactions. That kind of goes away because of the decentralization that comes natively from the L1. So we are actually improving not just decentralization security, but also performance. That I think has been always a question mark. That okay, can we beat Solana's performance? That definitely you would see that very soon.
And so as more of the ecosystem transitions into a based rollup or goes from optimistic to ZK rollups, Ethereum is going to evolve with this. AltLayer and its rollup as a service model helps to run a lot of the infrastructure that helps support these rollups. What do you think about the transition of how these rollups run their infrastructure? Do you think this is going to become a little bit more ubiquitous and the support is just going to continue to just kind of stay flat, or will it evolve and you will continue to evolve with it as these changes happen?
We definitely will evolve. So for example, today as a RAS service, we are the one running your sequencer. Is as simple as that. And the clients don't even want to bother. Like they say, okay, you are my partner, you understand the underlying stack very well, you run the sequencer. In some cases, they say, okay, you can run the sequencer, but we have control over the keys in some way. So they basically delegate the key, and then if at some point they don't like a RAS provider, they could say, I'm going to delegate this key to someone else, some other RAS vendor. So they want to control in some sense, but the actual sequencer is being run by the RAS provider. Now, many of these basic rollups, eventually they will have different configurations in which you could run these sequencers. So a very simple model would be a basic round robin, where, I don't know, let's say somehow after a certain time period, you pick a sequencer and that sequencer does something, orders transaction for you, or you could have like you could decide many different kind of policies. So it actually gives flexibility to the builders to say, okay, fine, even if we don't want to decentralize the whole thing, what we could at least do is we could run two sequences in some sense, one being run by us, so AltLayer, and the other could be run by the partner. So the actual client itself. And then you actually have a balance. So if, let's say, for whatever reasons, if the RAS provider actually goes down, you still have a sequence that can be used. So the answer is yes, it will evolve in a sense that we have to accommodate other partners in the sequencing landscape, and that we are open to it.
Yeah. I mean, it does seem like there's the benefits that you get from using Ethereum sequencing seem to be very, very strong in terms of composability, in terms of actually getting the properties of Ethereum L1. But I'm just not sure. Do you think builders are going to be convinced that this is the right way, rather than just running a single sequencer, spinning it up, not dealing with any of the technical headaches of setting up a base rollup? Like I think Spire maybe is working on a based rollup stack that could plug into AltLayer. I don't know where they're at in the development of that, but it just still seems to me like a technical hurdle to get this over the line versus just doing it kind of I guess like the normal way now.
You're right. So I would say that there are two parts to this. One is over the last, year or so, the demand for rollups have definitely gone down. We are seeing that from our client perspective. There was a time when we were basically rejecting clients. We didn't have enough manpower or bandwidth to handle them. And now that definitely is not the case anymore. And so definitely the demand has slowed down. Now, having said that, you could see some of the bigger players coming up now. So, the likes of Robinhood, the likes of Stripe, the likes of Circle, and so on. And again, unfortunately, I can't name the name of a client, but they are a really big client, and they are actually exploring base rollups quite actively. And all it takes is one or two clients actually committing to using it. And once that comes in, then you as a, let's say, smaller client, you as a smaller rollup, you would want to be able to compose with that bigger rollup in some sense, because that bigger rollup let's say Stripe, for example. If Stripe decides to become a base rollup, which I hope Ethereum Foundation convinces them to do so, or Paradigm does that. But anyway, so whoever convinces them, once they convert to a base rollup, then a lot of other smaller chains would definitely want to be in that circle of composability. And so that will also help push the demand. But I would agree that it's still very early stage. Nothing really has gone live from a pure base sequencing rollup. So I would say give us another 6 to 8 months, and then we'll see some results out of this.
Got it.
And hopefully from learnings as well.
And so I'm curious, without kind of naming names, it makes sense what you're saying. The smaller clients and rollups will have the network effects of tapping into a larger one once it's there. But the first one is kind of the pioneer, right? There's not really existing network effects for the bigger one to start off this train. So what are they looking at? Why are they looking to be a based rollup, even though they would be the first one?
I think it's a lot of alignment for sure. That's number one. And by the way, what you're mentioning is this network effect always has this chicken and egg problem, right? Okay, who's going to be the first? And we have seen that in case of decentralized shared sequencers platforms that were being built, including, for example, the likes of Espresso, where okay, I would join in if others are in, right? That's always a question. And that's always a question for at least the smaller people, or let's say medium, or chains that are somewhat in the middle, right? But the bigger ones, they don't care. Like bigger ones, they know that they have their own distributions, so they don't care. And they are, in my view, they would be the first ones to actually go and say, I will be the base sequencer, or I'll go with the base sequencing model, because they don't have to worry about, okay, where I'm going to get users from, and so on, because they already have that user base. Now, the challenge will still be like, okay, how do you, and what do they see in base sequencing? My view is, of course, the first is alignment. And it has to come from Ethereum Foundation, in my view. Ethereum Foundation has to convert at least one of the biggest or the bigger players to say, okay, you should commit to become a base sequencing, and then the rest will follow automatically. Convincing, and the reason would be one is the speed. Like if people say, okay, if I do, by the way, I've tested that out myself. So basically, if you look at vanilla OP stack and vanilla Arbitrum, and if you look at the stacks coming out from Spire Labs or even 𝘂𝘂𝘶, the speed is actually faster. So the base is, especially from pre-confirmation that you're getting, is actually way faster than what you're getting from a vanilla rollup today. Again, you cannot compare exactly the security parameters here, but at least in terms of performance, you actually feel it is way faster. So of course, that speed will matter, especially if you're a bigger player like Stripe or someone who wants to settle transactions really, really fast.
Fascinating. Well, Amirit, I appreciate you sharing that insight with us. The base rollup ecosystem sounds like it's ripe for some growth and for scale. And I think you helped remind us about the network effects of the based sequencing. Once we have a significant player that goes live as a based rollup, we'll start to see these smaller rollups jump on and tap into the network effects of synchronous composability.
Indeed, indeed.
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on, man.
Amirit, get some rest, man. It's been a marathon for us. I think we have one more left. It's been like 3 hours. We're pretty cooked. I think now we're having tech issues on Twitter. It never ends.
Well, this is technical stuff that always has glitches. Anyway, thanks, Andy and Robbie for hosting me, and good luck with the rest of the show.
See you in Korea.
Yeah, I will not go, but you'll see 𝘗𝘳𝘃.
In Singapore.
Yeah, Singapore, yes.
You'll be there.
Yeah, I'll come.
Alrighty, Amirit.
Okay, see you, Andy.
Thank you, man.
Thank you, Robbie.
Yep.
All right, guys, looks like we're having some weird little issues on Twitter. We're just going to keep the stream rolling into YouTube and otherwise, yeah, it's weird. It looks like the entirety of Twitter or X streaming is down. I see. I don't know if we can even get X back up. No, I see Thread Guy is also down. His stream will not play. So it looks like Twitter streaming is down. That's all good. Let's get Harry up. We'll finish strong on YouTube here, and we'll get Harry, and we'll get
Amir from Puffer.
Amir, or we can just move these. Rob, what do you think? We should just go through them, huh?
Yeah. Let's run through. Let's finish up the base stream strong, and we'll keep moving.
All right. Yep.
Run through the finish line here. Cool. Let's get Harry up when we can. It's been a pretty fun stream so far. Kind of reminded us about base rollups. I feel like we had so many conversations about base rollups 3 months ago.
Yeah.
And then
they kind of just faded into the abyss, and then exactly. So we got Harry coming up. We'll get him on stage. Again, guys, I don't know what's going on with Twitter. Our apologies. Feel like I don't really know what's going on.
Yeah, that's all right. We're still live on YouTube. And we've
Let's
got
get Harry up.
in the back.
Harry,
Here he is. There's
good
the
to see
man.
you, man.
Good to see you too. Long time no see.
Yeah, welcome to
man.
the show.
I think we
Having-
saw you last in Cannes.
Yeah, about that time.
Yeah, man. We're on a base roll-up marathon today. You are our second last guest. We've talked ZK, pre-comps. We've talked
MEV,
introp, composability, stablecoins, DATs. We're going to talk block building today. For those of the community who's new to Lubin, maybe you can give us a quick primer as to what Lubin is, what you guys are focused on, some of the recent developments. That would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think first of all, thank you, Robbie, Andy, putting this together, the whole Rollup team. Appreciate that. Saw some familiar faces, been a little out of the loop on the socials, but happy to see everybody still keeping up the good fight. So for us, we're trying to do our part to make base Rollup a reality to Ethereum, because for obvious reasons, it's good for Ethereum. So for us, I think for the past 12 months or so, we've been deep in the trenches with base Rollup teams building around the base Rollup. So we have a pre-confirmation protocol. That's how we started. And L1 basically addressed the problem about how we can allow the L2s, not only the base Rollup, but kind of the focus was for base Rollup to really settle on Ethereum L1. So that's kind of like the bottom of the stack to begin with. In the process of building that, learned a lot of lessons, one of which was that when talking to validators was like, okay, base Rollup are good, but how do we actually meaningfully get revenue? How do we connect it with the base Rollups? So we knew that we need to figure out a way to really connect the roll operators, block builders, and validators, put them into one picture. So now we have a delegation framework where we allow the validators to delegate the sequencing right for the base Rollup to specialize the parties, like the gateways, some people call them block builders or sequencers. Just lately, I think in the past 2 to 3 months, we also collaborated with the Taiko. We're building a gateway for the Taiko as well. So currently it's not live or on testnet, but it's currently in our closed devnet. It's been running for 3 months. So I think, as you can tell, there's kind of like a pattern there. Like we moved it from the very bottom of the stack, how L2 gets interacted with L1. Then we think about how the validators can participate in this process, and eventually how we get a sequence for the base Rollup as well. So I think there is a last step, which I will call it the 1.2.0, which will be the focus for, I would say, the next 6 to 12 months. I can't really talk about it. Really, like, I don't want to fumble the announcement. That's I can't really give too much detail, but we're moving even up in terms of the bottom, the stack. We're working with the real user, the application developers, to really build a product that leverages the base Rollup technology for the users. So I think that's basically the TLDR about us, what's been happening in the past 12 months, a near-term roadmap for what will happen in the next 6 to 12 month time horizon.
Man, I wish we could ask more about what you guys have, but don't want to push you too hard on the announcement and let the cat out of the bag. Harry, I'm curious about your take on something that happened recently in the gas market on Ethereum. And we kind of talked around this subject, but we didn't really talk about this with any of our previous guests. So maybe it was about a week ago, maybe earlier this week, World Liberty Fi launched on Ethereum mainnet and spiked the gas fee. And so recently gas has been around 𝘰𝘮𝘴, but this kind of pushed things up. And so I'm curious, from your perspective, do you think this is a positive or a negative thing to see that, okay, we actually have a gas spike? And would you anticipate that if we get another popular application and everyone's rushing to go claim and, buy or sell, would this happen again? Should we expect it to happen again? Or is there parameters and changes that we're putting into place to kind of level out the gas market going forward?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. So I think this is not the first time this similar thing has happened, right? It's not only on L1, but even on L2s. I remember 2 years ago, or like 1.5 years ago, there was a layer 0 R drop or something on Arbitrum that even drive up the block price. So I think the price for block space is really just a matter of like a supply-demand dynamic. You can have a certain kind of like a function to stabilize that, or but there will always be design trade-offs. Like EIP 1559 is kind of an answer that Ethereum has. I think there's no problem with that. From my perspective, I think that's a good thing. It means that people are still using Ethereum, and I think that kind of pushes the narrative around like why should we scale the Ethereum L1 even more. I'm totally in that camp. So I personally would think that things like this will happen, and it will happen over and over again. And in my opinion, that's overall a good thing, because that basically is proven that people are still using the chain. But in terms of how we can actually address that, there's many ways to do that. So for example, we have our L1 protocol, pre-conf protocol, but in a way, it's almost like block space futures. Like applications can actually buy up block space and allocate the block space in advance so that they can get a deterministic price for that. So they don't have to, like, say, application buy up 10 million gas for future block, then their user can enjoy that. They don't really have to fight for the block conclusion. I'm sure we're not the only team building around that. There are ETHGas, many other teams are trying to do this. So I think there are solutions to this, and I think this will not be the end of it. It will happen again and again, and overall, I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, gas has been so low for a while. Like, it's been under 2 𝘬 for some time. 1 𝘬 really. So it's been good to see. And also the gas limit was just raised to 45. I think it gets raised to 60 next. Man, I'm curious if there's been any new developments in block building, like if there's been any more, interesting happenings from, searchers, proposers, if there's been any developments in the MEV supply chain that you've found interesting, maybe in the last quarter. Like, has there been any new research or anything that you guys are kind of like interested in at Lubin?
I would say that there's a lot of interesting things, but I think the one particular thing that interests me the most, not necessarily the Lubin, which is actually Hyperliquid. I know this is about base rollup. It should be about base rollup.
No, that's all good.
Okay, I do want talk about like this interesting dynamic between Hyper EVM and a Hypercore, because I think every other major chains like Solana, Ethereum, all have this kind of like MEV solutions. Like on Ethereum, we have Flashbots being the first one. On Solana, we have 𝘐𝘳𝘃. I wouldn't be surprised. There will be some kind of a similar protocol being built on Hyperliquid between Hypercore and Hyper EVM, because how the Hyper EVM works is like basically every call from the EVM to Hypercore is going through the public mempool, and you can actually buy and sell assets controlled by Hyper EVM, and you can sell and buy asset on Hypercore, which go through the public mempool. If it goes through the public mempool, there'll be front running, arbitrage, all things. So I think the volume is not there yet, and so it's not. I think Hyper EVM has probably only been alive for half a year, maybe give or take. So we haven't seen a lot of MEV activities happening, at least in the public discourse. I'm sure smart people are doing that, but it hasn't gotten to a point where we need to address that. But I think it won't take too long for some measure being put in place to address that issue, especially the Hyper EVM ecosystem that gets more mature. So I think that's just a further kind of a proof point. Whenever there's a public blockchain, there's a permission of the blockchain, there will always be MEV related. Similar with the base rollup as well. I think when it comes down to base rollup, I think my value proposition for base rollup is basically, everybody know that it's good for Ethereum, but what does it do for the user, right? Like, can they actually compete with Arbitrum, optimism, and all that? My value proposition is that basically a synchronous composability aspect of it. So the base rollup user can actually enjoy the benefits of being composable with L1, or there are some novel designs that are being discussed by Tarun about, like, you can actually use a ZK EVM to never really bridge your asset from the L1 to the L2. For example, like, you can lock up your fund into a vault on L1, and you generate a proof and send this proof to the L2, and the L2 know that this money is being logged, and then they can mint a certain token and reuse this L1 asset to collect collateral to open up perp positions, for example, if it's a perp DEX. So of course, there's a timing difference between the block time. Because if there's a timing difference, there was always MEV. So I think a synchronous composability, because this is a very new thing, I have yet to see anything live yet. So it's a bit early to talk about will there be MEV involved. My answer is of course, 100% there will be MEV involved if this kind of a gate gate is open. So I think that's something in the horizon that I think will happen, and we're very interested in figuring out what product or feature to build along this kind of like a new development around MEV and MEV supply chain.
Yeah. You know, I was on a date once, I was on a date. I was hanging out with a crypto girl, and she asked me to explain to her the MEV supply chain. I couldn't do it. I could do it, but it was hard.
Yeah, I think MEV is really everywhere. I think it's just that even in real life, like there's a lot of close analogies, just like like sneaker botting scene.
Yes, the 2016 sneaker botting class.
Yeah,
elite,
exactly.
Elite block building right there. Harry, what's the revenue model going to be like for Lubin as you guys get these new products rolled out and get these integrations dialed in?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. I think in general, there's a lot of ways to make money in crypto, but I think in my opinion, the proven way to make money in crypto are only two ways. First is swap fee driven. You think about Uniswap, Hyperliquid, any exchange, or central exchange like Binance. It's basically swap fee driven. The other way is balance sheet driven. It's more like a DeFi model. You can think about Ethereum. Like you have a lot of money, you just people want to earn yield in a kind of like a risk averse way. You just park your asset there and you make money. So I think this new product we're trying to build is basically a combination of both. So because it's a proven strategy to make money, to generate revenue, and historically, this are targeted at two groups of users. Like swap fee driven applications are more for the speculators, traders. They want to earn like 10x, 100 as X upside. Then you have another group of users like DeFi power users or farmers. They just simply have a lot of money. They just want to park there and have a more productive use. How to really combine these two together is basically the question we're trying to answer here. So I would say that is the revenue model here. And how does that relate to base Rollup? Because everything that we're going to build are basically be built on top of assumptions that we're going to use all the infrastructure we have built so far for the base Rollup. Means that Ethereum validators, Ethereum L1 can actually get a share of that. Because I think the end goal, maybe not end goal, but for me, it's like why base Rollup? I think the first answer is like it's good for Ethereum, but how? We have to figure out a way to really share some of the revenue with Ethereum L1. But why would application do that? Why Rollup do that? Is it just because of out of the it shouldn't be run like a charity. Why do people? Because people should enjoy synchronous composability capability for the base Rollup, and people should pay for that. And the synchronous composability, you're always talking about not only the L2 transaction, but also L1 transactions. So you can imagine that if every transaction on the base Rollup needs to be synchronously composable with L1, that also means that they need to pay an L1 transaction fee. And people want to pay that because people want to use this application. So that's kind of like how I think about the revenue model, different revenue. At least to base Rollup.
Yo, Harry, you there? All righty, guys. All right, guys.
Yeah.
Yo, Harry, you there?
Okay.
Oh.
I think we got him.
We got you, Harry. All right.
I can hear you
All right,
perfect.
great. No, you just. I think you were closing out there. Anyhow, I think that was. Did you have anything left to add? It just kind of cut off on the last minute or the last like 10 seconds there.
I think that's good. That's good. I pretty much made my point already.
Cool.
Yeah. No, I think that was the last thing that we had from you or for you. It's been a marathon today. I think we're gonna wrap this up. Thank you for joining us and being a part of the Base Rollup Day. And yeah, man, looking forward to the upcoming news that you guys have on the Lubin side. Hope to get you back on soon.
Appreciate it, Andy, Robbie. Thank you so much.
All right,
Absolutely.
Harry.
We'll see you next
Keep
time.
cooking, man. See you soon.
Take care.
Cheers,
Bye.
buddy.
Cheers, brother.
Alrighty, guys. Man, what a day. Of course, Twitter bricks us at the end. So close. We had that thing rolling, 10 guests, no issues. Thing was popping on Twitter. And
Shout out to Ethereum.
Shout out to Elon. Great stream. We'll have to recap this tomorrow morning. So we'll have to go over the map tomorrow, talk about the map, talk about the stream, and kind of throw that in there for half hour tomorrow morning.
Yeah, I think that is on the docket. Lots of cool topics today. I think we're going to wrap up. It's been 3 hours.
It's been a journey. Thank you guys for being here. Shout out to Elon. Thanks for rugging us, and see you guys tomorrow. Can we get the end screen, please?
Roll credits.